Important update about YouTube playlists. Hey everyone. We've received many messages asking why our YouTube playlists aren't showing up. Do we create YouTube playlists? Yes, we absolutely do. So why can't you see them? Honestly, we're not sure. We've been in contact with YouTube support for several months now, but we still haven't received a clear answer or solution. After much discussion, our team has decided to take matters into our own hands. We believe the issue might be related to the number of playlists we've created on a single channel, possibly too many. Our solution? We're launching 2 additional YouTube channels, giving us a total of 3. This way, we can organize our audiobooks better and avoid the playlist visibility issue in the future. This change only affects our YouTube audience. If you're a patron supporter, you can still access all our audiobooks by visiting the collection menu on Patreon. Thanks so much for your time and continued support. Happy listening. With Yahiko convinced, Byakuya turned to Conan and Nagato, who both agreed without objection, eager to visit the Jado statue. They, too, were curious about what gave the Jado statue the power to intimidate the shinobi world. The group moved quickly, arriving shortly after at a vast underground cavern outside Hidden Rain Village. The cavern was enormous, with a ceiling over 100 meters high and an area spanning several football fields. In the depths of the cavern, the group immediately spotted the central figure, the Jado statue. The statue was grotesque, with 9 eyes and a body resembling desiccated wood. 10 column-like protrusions jutted out from its back, making it look like a meditating demon god. At first glance, Conan found the statue strangely familiar, as if it had been crafted using wood-style techniques, something Byakuya happened to specialize in. Having seen Byakuya use wood-style before, Conan had memorized its distinctive traits. Byakuya, this Jado statue looks like it's made of wood. Is it related to wood-style? Byakuya nodded and explained, the Jado statue is indeed connected to wood style. In fact, it is the origin of wood style. Though it appears withered and damaged now, its vitality is astonishing. Heck, its destructive power surpasses that of most tailed beasts. Hearing this, Conan swiftly moved closer to the statue. As she approached, she felt its overwhelming vitality, accompanied by an inexplicable sense of dread. It was as if her body and chakra were instinctively recoiling from the Jado statue. Unable to stay near it for long, Conan returned to Byakuya's side, visibly shaken, and asked with a trembling voice, Byakuya, I believe this Jado statue is the shell of the Ten Tails. Its oppressive presence is simply terrifying. Nearby, Yahiko stroked his chin, deep in thought. He, too, felt the suffocating pressure emanating from the Jado statue, which reinforced the feasibility of Byakuya's plan. But was the Jado statue truly reliable? Could the Akatsuki control such a force? And what would happen if the statue turned against them? At that moment, Nagato, who had been silent, showed a surprised expression. Compared to a few years ago, the Jado statue seems much stronger now. I remember it being much weaker before. Byakuya, did you do something to enhance it? Byakuya nodded again and said, You're correct, Nagato. Over the years, I've been working to restore the Jado statue. I tried having ninja infuse it with chakra and even relocating it to areas rich in chakra, but the results were unsatisfactory. Eventually, after researching its origins, I realized the Jado statue needs tailed beasts to regain its strength. So, I captured a Jinchuriki to provide it with chakra. You captured a Jinchuriki? Nagato quickly caught onto the key detail and, after a moment's thought, asked, Was it during that mission to Hidden Hot Water Village, when we were hired by Jiraiya-sensei? Exactly. After capturing the 2 tails Jinchuriki, I secretly kept her instead of handing her over to Hidden Lee Village or Hidden Clouds Village. It was all in preparation for reviving the Ten Tails. Faced with Nagato's skepticism, Byakuya revealed everything without hesitation. Conan, shocked, exclaimed, That was 3 years ago. You were planning to revive the Ten Tails as far back as 3 years ago? That's way too early. Byakuya took a deep breath and replied with a hint of helplessness, I've always been someone who plans 3 steps ahead. After securing Hidden Rain Village, I began thinking about how to bring more shinobi villages under Akatsuki's influence, but due to Hidden Rain Village's inherent limitations, no matter how fast we develop, we lack the ability to challenge the 5 great shinobi villages. Only by possessing an overwhelming power can we make the 5 great shinobi villages truly listen to us. Conan nodded, understanding the truth in Byakuya's words. If not for Byakuya's near-maniacal strategic thinking, Akatsuki would have perished under Hanzo and Denzo's combined assaults long ago. After a long silence, Yahiko stood with his hands behind his back and asked, What's the condition of the 2 tails Jinchuriki? I recall you mentioned in the meeting earlier that during the process of collecting the tailed beasts, you need to extract them from their Jinchuriki and seal them into the Jado statue. Byakuya glanced toward the sealed chamber behind the Jado statue. After sensing the state of the sealing array within, he replied, "Her condition isn't great, but it's not terrible either." Yahiko sighed deeply. "Don't make her suffer too long. Once the timing is right, proceed with the sealing ceremony. For a Jinchuriki, being imprisoned like this is a torment in itself." Both Conan and Nagato nodded in agreement. In the shinobi world, it was common knowledge that once a tailed beast was extracted from its Jinchuriki, the host would die due to the sudden loss of vast amounts of chakra and life force. Thus, the process of collecting the tailed beasts inevitably endangered the Jinchuriki's life. Though Yahiko and the others were pragmatic ninja, they didn't want to see a Jinchuriki endure excessive suffering. Byakuya's tone turned slightly odd as he said, "Who told you a Jinchuriki has to die when separated from their tailed beast? As long as a large amount of life force is supplied promptly, a Jinchuriki can survive even after the tailed beast is extracted." "Hey! Do you underestimate the Uzumaki clan's bloodline, or are you underestimating my medical ninjutsu?" Chapter 302, The revitalized demigod Hanzo learning that Jinchuriki could survive the extraction of their tailed beast seized Yahiko and the others. Their lingering guilt disappeared, leaving their minds clearer. Byakuya observed their reactions silently, letting out a faint sigh. Yahiko, Nagato, and Conan are too kind-hearted. They're even worried about strangers they've never met. Meanwhile, I'm here breaking my back for the sake of Akatsuki. Still, this was the role of a father figure, to shoulder the burdens and protect the crew of Akatsuki's ship. Having set aside their worries, Yahiko turned to Byakuya and asked, "Byakuya, who's your first target? The Jinchuriki from Hidden Sand Village or the one from Hidden Mist Village?" To Yahiko, Hidden Sand Village and Hidden Mist Village seemed like the easiest targets. The reason was simple: these two villages were the weakest among the 5 great shinobi villages, located at the edges of the continent. Even if their Jinchuriki disappeared mysteriously, they wouldn't dare to publicize it. Hidden Stones Village and Hidden Clouds Village, however, were different. Hidden Stones Village's Jinchuriki, Rashi and Han, were formidable on their own. The disappearance of one would undoubtedly alarm the other. As for Hidden Clouds Village, Killer Bee was the strongest Jinchuriki in the world, even surpassing the 4th Raikage. While the Nighttail's Jinchuriki in Hidden Leaf Village might be the easiest to deal with, his mentor, Jiraiya, was still a Hidden Leaf Village shinobi. Confronting their former teacher was something they wanted to avoid for now. Byakuya pondered for a moment before replying, "Hidden Mist Village is already under surveillance by Akatsuki members. When the time is right, we'll be notified to capture the tailed beast there. That's not something we need to worry about. For now, I plan to target Hidden Sand Village's one-tailed Jinchuriki. It should be a relatively straightforward operation." Ignoring Byakuya's latter comment, Yahiko frowned and asked, "You have operatives in Hidden Mist Village? They're capable of monitoring the Jinchuriki's movements? But isn't the 3 Tails Jinchuriki the 4th Mizukage himself? When did you recruit such capable allies?" Byakuya shook his head. "The masked man isn't my subordinate. He's more of an ally." He continued, "He was the one who told me about the Jido statue's purpose and proposed the plan to revive the 10 Tails. Though, to be honest, his reasoning for wanting the 10 Tails is laughable." Yahiko's face darkened. A masked man causing major disturbances in the shinobi world. Could he be the same masked man responsible for the 9 Tails attack? Working with him is like making a deal with the devil. Byakuya chuckled. "Don't worry about me. I know him well and understand the chaos he's caused. But against my wood style and Nagato's Rinnegan, he can't stir up much trouble. Besides, how else could I track him without cooperating? Dangerous individuals like him are safer to keep close at hand. And let me remind you, he's not the only unusual recruit I've brought in over the years." Yahiko had no retort. Byakuya's recruits were indeed all extremely dangerous. Pikazu was an infamous bounty hunter who once fought the first Hokage. Sasori of the Red Sand, a master puppeteer and rogue from Hidden Sand Village, was another deadly addition. Even the seemingly inconspicuous Hidan and Shino had troubling backgrounds, being a cultist of Jashin and a leader of the Sky Ninja, respectively. But in a way, Byakuya had amassed a remarkable pool of talent, making Akatsuki a formidable force. After leaving the underground cavern, Byakuya returned to Akatsuki's base. After a brief stroll, he found Hanzo the salamander training new recruits and invited him to his office. Seeing the puzzled expression on Hanzo's face, Byakuya smiled meaningfully. "Hanzo-sensei, Yahiko and I just discussed it. We've decided to fulfill the dream you couldn't achieve." Hanzo's body stiffened. After a pause, he replied, "Has Akatsuki reached its limits? Are you so eager to challenge the 5 great nations? Why not wait another 10 or 20 years? You're all still young. You can outlast the likes of me and my generation. Once the 3rd Hokage and the 3rd Tsuchikage pass away, you can act as you please. It's not the old men I fear, it's the young who trouble me more. Byakuya chuckled and said, Hanzo-sensei, don't keep saying you're Akatsuki. Aren't you a part of Akatsuki too? Aren't we all shinobi of Akatsuki and Hidden Rain Village? Hanzo gave Byakuya a complicated look and replied, Hidden Rain Village belongs to Akatsuki, but Akatsuki does not belong to Hidden Rain Village. I know what you and Yahiko have been up to all these years. You've secretly annexed several small nations during the Great Ninja War, expanding Akatsuki's influence several-fold. That's something I could never achieve. But let me warn you, when I challenged the 5 great villages, only Hidden Sand Village and Hidden Leaf Village responded. Even then, I was defeated, and Hidden Rain Village lost its ambition, confined to the narrow lawns of the Land of Rain. Your strength may surpass mine, but if you fail, your punishment will be far harsher than mine. Hidden Rain Village itself might cease to exist. So, take my advice, wait a few more decades. Byakuya could tell that Hanzo's concern was genuine. Over the years, he had become deeply integrated into Akatsuki, training recruits and providing sound advice. While Byakuya knew that waiting longer would be ideal, Kaguya's resurrection and the arrival of the Otsutsuki clan wouldn't wait. If he didn't gain strength equal to theirs within 10 years, he would become a mere pawn in the upcoming conflicts. After a moment of silence, Byakuya replied, Your advice is sound, Hanzo-sensei, but I must decline. If I wanted a peaceful life, I could have joined Hidden Leaf Village long ago. With my Uzumaki heritage and wood style, I might have even been trained as the next god of shinobi. But I didn't go to Hidden Leaf Village because I found no reason to. My path lies elsewhere. Hanzo fell silent, contemplating Byakuya's words. After a long pause, he finally said, Tell me your plan. Let me see if this old body of mine can still be of use to you. While I may no longer deserve the title of demigod, there are still many in the shinobi world who see me as one. Chapter 303, The Body and the Soul. After listening to Byakuya's elaborate plan for creating a weaponized Tentails, the aged salamander Hanzo fell into a long silence. Faced with such an audacious and nearly reckless plan, he struggled to offer any constructive advice. If Byakuya succeeded and the Tentails were resurrected, the ninja world could indeed experience a rare era of peace. However, if the plan failed, Hidden Rain Village would be plunged into a catastrophe from which it might never recover. After much deliberation, Hanzo finally spoke in a slow, measured tone, Forgive me, but this old man may not be able to help you much. However, if the plan is exposed, you may as well put the blame on me. I don't care about my reputation anymore. His words were sincere. Hanzo had long ceased to concern himself with legacy or honor. Byakuya chuckled, shaking his head. I don't believe my plan will fail. Even if it does, I'll bear the consequences alone. With that, he turned and left the room. Byakuya had come merely to test Hanzo's loyalty. It seemed the old man, despite his flaws, still possessed the integrity befitting his title as a demigod. Byakuya was not disappointed. After leaving the training grounds, Byakuya headed toward another section of the base. With a one-tailed Jinchuriki set as their primary target, it was time to decide on the team for the mission. Within Akatsuki, the 2 people most familiar with Hidden Sand Village were Seisaori of the Red Sand and Orochimaru. The former was Hidden Sand Village's most gifted puppet master and the grandson of Chio, one of the village's elders. The latter had previously commanded the Kikyo Mountain campaign and had clashed with the 4th Kazekage on the battlefield. As a result, Orochimaru was undoubtedly Hidden Leaf Village's foremost expert on Hidden Sand Village. From what Byakuya remembered, Orochimaru maintained a secret connection with Hidden Sand Village even after defecting from Hidden Leaf Village. In the original storyline, just before the Chunin exams, the 4th Kazekage even invited Orochimaru to collaborate on the Hidden Leaf Village crush plan. During the exam, Orochimaru had orchestrated chaos in an attempt to destroy Hidden Leaf Village. What the 4th Kazekage didn't know, however, was that Orochimaru never intended to destroy Hidden Leaf Village. He merely wanted to catch up with his former mentor and ensure that Hiruzen Sarutobi met his end in combat. Orochimaru had, in fact, assassinated the 4th Kazekage before the plan even began. Snapping himself out of his musings, Byakuya found Seisaori in the Akatsuki laboratory. Beyond a glass partition, Seisaori was meticulously assembling puppet limbs. Some of the limbs were crafted from steel and wood, while others were made of flesh and blood. Since Seisaori had developed his wireless puppet control technology, Byakuya had been encouraging him to delve into prosthetic puppetry. Though Seisaori did not entirely grasp Byakuya's intent, he eagerly pursued any advancements in puppet craft. Byakuya's reasoning was simple. In the ninja world, both shinobi and civilians frequently suffered amputations or other injuries. Instead of living out their days with crutches, wouldn't it be better to replace lost limbs with chakra-controlled puppet prosthetics? In a way, this aligned with Seisaori's philosophy of eternal puppetry. The key difference was that, unlike others who might reluctantly turn to puppet prosthetics, Seisaori had willingly transformed himself. He had condensed his consciousness and chakra into a core, leaving his physical body almost entirely replaced. As Byakuya's footsteps approached, Seisaori turned slowly. Spotting Byakuya, his expression remained as stoic as ever. "Are you here to check on the progress of the prosthetic puppets?" he asked bluntly. "Look, creating prosthetic limbs is simple enough, but controlling them requires substantial knowledge of puppetry. If you're aiming for prosthetics that even ordinary shinobi can use, it'll take at least another 5 years of research." Seisaori then added, his tone matter of fact. "I say, why not just go with my idea? Convert the injured directly into chakra cores. That way, they'll never have to worry about getting hurt again. Isn't a body of steel superior to one of flesh and blood? Cold, unfeeling steel will never surpass a well-honed, living body," Byakuya thought to himself, suppressing a sigh. "Not everyone is willing to undergo full-body transformation like you, Seisaori. And as you mentioned earlier, the technology isn't perfect? Full-body conversion carries significant risks." Seisaori scoffed. "To attain an immortal body, risks are inevitable. Without resolve and determination, how can one even hope to be a proper ninja?" Byakuya couldn't help but sweat at Seisaori's conviction. "It seems there isn't a single sane scientist in this entire ninja world," he thought ruefully. Under Byakuya's command, 3 scientific ninjas stood out: Seisaori, obsessed with puppet modification; Shinno, who constantly sought ways to enhance the human body; and Orochimaru, who focused on researching Kekkei Genkai and natural energy while delving into soul-based studies. From this perspective, even without pursuing the Moon's Eye plan, the Akatsuki could easily be seen as the quintessential villains. After a moment of contemplation, Byakuya addressed Seisaori, "This visit isn't about prosthetics. After discussions with the organization's higher-ups, we've decided to initiate the Ten Tails hunting plan." "Hunting the tailed beasts?" Seisaori raised his eyebrows slightly. He had long understood Byakuya's overarching goals and wasn't particularly surprised. However, he had expected the execution of the Ten Tails plan to be delayed by a few more years. After a brief pause, Seisaori asked, "Which tailed beast are we targeting first? And besides me, will there be other team members?" "Of course, the beasts will be hunted in order. I plan to start with the one tail." After a short pause, Byakuya added, "As for your teammate, it will still be Orochimaru. However, since this is the first mission, I'll be accompanying you as well." "Going after Bunpaku, the monk? And working with Orochimaru again?" Seisaori muttered, clearly dissatisfied with the arrangement, not because of any personal connection to Bunpaku, but because he despised teaming up with Orochimaru. The conflict between the two wasn't limited to their scientific disagreements, their personalities clashed fundamentally. With that in mind, Seisaori turned to Byakuya and said, "I don't need Orochimaru as a teammate. I can hunt the one-tailed Jinchuriki by myself." Byakuya shook his head and replied, "I trust your abilities, but the 4th Kazekage's magnet style counters your wind shadow puppet. Moreover, Hidden Sand Village has more than just the Kazekage to defend it." Seisaori's expression shifted at Byakuya's words. He wasn't wrong. Aside from the 4th Kazekage, Hidden Sand Village had plenty of other skilled ninjas. There was Pakura, who had been sent to Hidden Mist Village as a scapegoat a few years ago, and Seisaori's own grandmother, Elder Chio. The puppetry skills he now excelled at had all been taught to him by Chio. Although Seisaori had surpassed his grandmother in the art of puppetry, defeating her in battle was a far more challenging task. Considering this, Seisaori knew that taking on Hidden Sand Village alone was impossible, let alone capturing the one-tailed Jinchuriki alive. Noticing Seisaori's internal conflict, Byakuya spoke again, his tone calm but firm, "Bring your puppets and come with me to find Orochimaru. This plan cannot move forward without him." Chapter 304, Seisaori receives a mission from Akatsuki. After packing most of the puppets from the warehouse into storage scrolls, Seisaori and Byakuya departed from the Akatsuki base. As Seisaori donned the Hiroko puppet, Byakuya couldn't help but ask, "Seisaori, for someone like you, who has undergone core transformation, does this count as wearing a body or just clothes?" Seisaori glanced at Byakuya, silent for a while before replying, "I'm not sure if this is a body or clothing. Byakuya-sama, isn't this question a bit trivial? I was just curious." Seeing Seisaori unable to provide an answer, Byakuya dropped the subject. He soared into the air, heading toward the land of fields. Seisaori summoned his 3rd Kazekage puppet and followed closely behind. A few hours later, the two arrived at Hidden Sound Village, the sound village in the land of fields. Orochimaru, having been informed beforehand, stood on the ground, awaiting their arrival. Without any preamble, Byakuya landed and addressed Orochimaru directly. Orochimaru, how's the preparation for what I asked you to do? Orochimaru's expression showed some hesitation as he replied, the modifications to Edo Tensei are still incomplete. If I force its usage, there may be unforeseen consequences. That's fine. As long as you can successfully perform the technique, we can refine it later. With that, Byakuya gestured for Orochimaru to lead the way. Orochimaru didn't waste words, weaving hand signs and revealing a hidden entrance in the ground. Unlike other villages, Hidden Sound Village was predominantly an underground settlement. On the surface, it appeared to be an ordinary village, but hidden below was a vast, sprawling network resembling an underground city. Following Orochimaru through the tunnels, the trio arrived at a wide experimental site. In the center lay a coffin surrounded by an ominous aura of death. Seeing this, Sasori frowned, his curiosity piqued by the mysterious Edo Tensei. Noticing Sasori's confusion, Orochimaru smirked and explained, this, Sasori, is the forbidden technique I've been improving recently, Edo Tensei. It allows me to summon the souls of the dead from the Pure Land back to the living world. Sasori's body stiffened at Orochimaru's words, his gaze fixed on the coffin. Orochimaru continued, I've heard that your parents were killed by Hidden Leaf Village's White Fang a long time ago. But that's not a problem. If you can provide their genetic material, I can help you reunite with them. With a sly grin, Orochimaru added, see? I'm always thinking of ways to help my comrades. Sasori's expression darkened. While reviving his parents would be a good thing, he neither trusted Orochimaru nor had access to his parents' remains. Moreover, he suspected Orochimaru was deliberately provoking him. Just as Sasori was about to act, he paused and said instead, my parents are none of your concern. But as I recall, your parents died in an accident too. Now that you've mastered Edo Tensei, don't you plan to bring them back? Orochimaru's face froze. He didn't even know who his real parents were. On top of that, his adopted parents had been ordinary people incapable of chakra manipulation. Given how much time had passed, it was uncertain whether their souls still existed in the Pure Land. Sasori was clearly trying to provoke him. The atmosphere grew tense between the two, the air thick with hostility. Enough, Byakuya interrupted, his expression cold. We can talk about reviving parents later. Let's focus on seeing Orochimaru's latest results for now. At Byakuya's command, Orochimaru nodded, forming hand signs as the coffin's lid slowly creaked open. Sasori stared intently at the coffin, wondering which ninja would emerge. Byakuya, however, showed no interest. He already knew who Orochimaru had summoned, as it was under his orders. Moments later, the reanimated third Kazekage emerged from the coffin. Sasori's expression twisted at the sight of the third Kazekage. This was the man he had killed and turned into a human puppet. How had Orochimaru managed to summon him with Edo Tensei? Orochimaru smirked, his tone dripping with intrigue. Sasori, I deliberated for a long time before deciding to summon the third Kazekage. I've always been curious, what's more important to a ninja, the body or the soul? Sasori snorted disdainfully, pulling out a storage scroll. With a flick, he summoned his third Kazekage puppet. Funny, I was wondering the same thing. Let's see which is stronger, your Edo Tensei or my puppetry. Instead of responding directly, Orochimaru turned his gaze toward Byakuya. Byakuya gave a subtle nod, silently allowing the confrontation. Orochimaru began to manipulate the reanimated third Kazekage, drawing iron sand from the surrounding rocks and forming sharp triangular structures. Not to be outdone, Sasori commanded his puppet to manipulate pre-prepared iron sand, shaping it into cone-like formations. The clash was immediate and intense. The triangular and conical iron sand constructs collided, scattering fragments in all directions with loud, resonating booms. After several exchanges, neither Orochimaru nor Sasori gained the upper hand. Both were effectively controlling the same Kazekage, making the battle appear like a strange duel of self-opposition. Meanwhile, the Edo Tensei third Kazekage began to regain clarity amidst the repeated clashes. His consciousness returned, and he stared in disbelief at his decayed body, then at the puppet crafted from his corpse. The realization hit him like a thunderbolt. Not only had he been assassinated, but even in death, his body and soul were being exploited by different ninjas. It was an unparalleled humiliation. Noticing signs of mental collapse in the Kazekage, Byakuya intervened, calling off the battle. Enough. He instructed Orochimaru to release the Edo Tensei. As the jutsu was undone, Byakuya turned to Orochimaru, his tone measured but resolute. Orochimaru, your Edo Tensei is already highly refined. It's sufficient for us to move to the next stage. What stage? Orochimaru asked, his curiosity piqued. Before Byakuya could answer, Sasori interjected with a scoff. Our mission this time is to infiltrate Hidden Sand Village and hunt down the one-tailed Jinchuriki. Judging by your display earlier, your abilities might actually be useful during the operation. Sasori's confidence was palpable as he continued, Byakuya-sama will oversee the mission. Your job is to stall the fourth Kazekage. Leave the one-tailed Jinchuriki to me. I'll ensure it's brought back to the base without fail. Byakuya shook his head, correcting Sasori. Sasori, our mission isn't just to capture the one-tailed Jinchuriki. We aim to control Hidden Sand Village itself. Control Hidden Sand Village? Sasori's eyes narrowed as he turned to Byakuya. Byakuya's calm demeanor remained as he explained, if we openly hunt the one-tail, it will inevitably alert the other villages. By taking control of Hidden Sand Village, we can seal off any leaks and maintain an element of surprise. Sasori crossed his arms, skepticism evident. Controlling Hidden Sand Village won't be easy. If Raza goes missing, it'll draw the attention of that old hag Chio. Killing Raza and installing another puppet will be tricky at best. Byakuya's expression turned enigmatic as he glanced at Sasori, a faint smile playing on his lips. That's why I intend for you to become the fifth Kazekage. Once you assume that role, we won't have to worry about our activities being exposed. The room fell silent as Sasori processed Byakuya's audacious plan. The prospect of becoming the Kazekage was unexpected, yet strangely enticing. For Sasori, this was no ordinary mission, it was a challenge that could redefine the balance of power across the shinobi world. Chapter 305, Raza and Yoshimaru in Hidden Sand Village. The fourth Kazekage, Raza, wiped sweat from his brow as he exited the underground mines. A nearby Hidden Sand Village ninja rushed forward, offering him salted water and a towel. Raza accepted the water gratefully, drinking deeply before wiping his face and heading toward the Kazekage building. Once inside his office, Raza wasted no time. Sitting down, he began addressing the endless pile of documents detailing the village's affairs. As the leader of Hidden Sand Village, he knew he couldn't afford even a moment of negligence. This was the harsh reality of Hidden Sand Village's position. Though officially one of the 5 great shinobi villages, Hidden Sand Village lagged far behind Hidden Leaf Village, Hidden Stones Village, and Hidden Clouds Village in both strength and numbers. These 3 villages not only boasted more elite shinobi but also far outstripped Hidden Sand Village in sheer manpower. The only thing keeping Hidden Sand Village from being overrun by its neighbors, Hidden Leaf Village and Hidden Stones Village, was its possession of Shukaku, the One-Tail, and its meager wealth. Even so, Hidden Sand Village suffered a humiliating defeat to Hidden Leaf Village in the last Great Ninja War, forcing it into a subordinate alliance with Hidden Leaf Village. While officially allies, in truth, Hidden Sand Village had become little more than a vassal state. Merchants from the Land of Fire moved freely through the Land of Wind without paying tariffs. Mission requests that once belonged to Hidden Sand Village were now funneled to Hidden Leaf Village. Even the daimyo of the Land of Wind had begun questioning the necessity of Hidden Sand Village's existence, considering replacing it with Hidden Leaf Village as the nation's protector. Military funding for Hidden Sand Village had been drastically reduced as a result. These measures choked the village's development, limiting the number of shinobi Hidden Sand Village could sustain. If this trend continued for another decade or two, Hidden Sand Village would inevitably decline into a second-rate village, eventually fading from history altogether. Raza, as the fourth Kazekage, was determined to prevent that outcome. He had fought hard to defeat his rival, Bakura, and ascend to his position, not to lead a failing village. Thus, he shouldered the immense burden of revitalizing Hidden Sand Village, carefully allocating its limited resources to maintain a viable shinobi force. With insufficient students in the academy, Raza implemented an elite training system. No student could graduate without demonstrating skills near the level of a chunin. When the daimyo's resources proved insufficient to sustain a large shinobi force, Raza personally worked in the mines, using his magnet style to extract gold to fund the village. No matter how exhausting it was, he refused to stop until the village regained its strength. As he sorted through intelligence reports brought by the Hidden Sand Village Anbu, Raza's attention lingered on updates about Hidden Leaf Village and Hidden Stones Village. He had always closely monitored Hidden Leaf Village's affairs. During the Nine-Tails attack, he had sent a letter of condolence to the third Hokage while secretly hoping Hidden Leaf Village would collapse under the chaos. When conflict broke out between Hidden Leaf Village and Hidden Clouds Village, Raza sent reinforcements and restricted the activities of Lightning Country citizens in Hidden Sand Village. Despite these measures, Hidden Sand Village remained at a disadvantage. Even after losing the fourth Hokage and the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, Hidden Leaf Village's strength was still overwhelming compared to Hidden Sand Village. Hidden Leaf Village's ranks included the legendary Sannin, the Hokage, Denzo, and powerful clans like the Hyuga and Uchiha. Against such a lineup, Hidden Sand Village couldn't hope to compete in a direct confrontation. However, recent developments sparked a flicker of opportunity in Raza's mind. The Uchiha clan's massacre had destabilized Hidden Leaf Village internally, and Hidden Stones Village as border skirmishes with Hidden Leaf Village suggested cracks in its exterior. Raza began to consider whether now might be the time to strike. A well-timed attack could put enough pressure on Hidden Leaf Village to force concessions. Even if they couldn't seize territory, breaking free from Hidden Leaf Village's economic grip would be a significant victory. High-risk and high-reward plans like this were typical for Hidden Sand Village shinobi. Life in the desert had taught them that survival often hinged on bold gambles. But Raza faced a unique challenge that his predecessors hadn't. Hidden Sand Village lacked younger elite Jonin to take his place if something happened to him. If he fell in battle, the village would be left leaderless. Moreover, previous Kazekage gambles had all ended in disastrous losses. Another failure could spell the end of Hidden Sand Village altogether. For now, Raza could only continue to weigh his options, determined to protect his village at all costs, even if it meant risking everything. Pulling his wandering thoughts back into focus, the fourth Kazekage, Raza, abandoned his plan to backstab Hidden Leaf Village. He certainly didn't want Hidden Sand Village to become a casualty in the ongoing conflict between Hidden Leaf Village and Hidden Stones Village. Moreover, Hidden Sand Village currently didn't have a suitable Jinchuriki, and they didn't have the strength to launch an assault on Hidden Leaf Village. Thinking of the Jinchuriki, Raza furrowed his brows and called out to the surrounding air, "Anbu, how is Gaara doing? Is he still unable to control his temper, unable to manage Shukaku inside him?" A moment of silence passed before the Anbu responded, "Keisuke-sama, Lord Gaara still cannot control Shukaku." After a brief pause, the Anbu agent hesitated before continuing, "Keisuke-sama, don't you think it's a bit too much to keep provoking Gaara-sama? Over the past few months, he's already killed many of our own ninjas. We're worried that Gaara-sama will be overwhelmed by this pressure and be consumed by Shukaku. Are you trying to teach me how to do things?" Raza's expression hardened as he narrowed his eyes. "Also, stop calling Gaara Gaara-sama. He is the Jinchuriki of this village. The Jinchuriki is nothing more than a tool for expanding our power, and tools don't need to be worried about others' opinions. But Gaara is your and Gaara-sama's child." The Hidden Sand Village Anbu spoke cautiously, seemingly trying to convince Raza to reconsider his harsh treatment of Gaara. With a cold expression, Raza responded, "Yashimaru, since you're so intent on defending Gaara, I'll make myself clear. I have already lost faith in Gaara. I'm planning to replace him with a new Jinchuriki. Tonight, you're to assassinate Gaara and tell him you hate him. If he manages to control Shukaku's power this time, I might consider letting him remain as the Jinchuriki." With those words, Raza made a gesture signaling the end of the conversation. Yashimaru shot one last, lingering glance at Raza before slowly stepping back and leaving the Kazekage office. He couldn't help but feel disappointed in the fourth Kazekage. Raza might be a competent leader, but he was certainly no good father or husband, or perhaps, a person. Chapter 306, A Kind and Harmonious Family. After 3 days of travel, Byakuya and his group finally arrived at Hidden Sand Village. Hidden Sand Village was located in a massive basin oasis, surrounded by towering cliffs dozens of meters high, with only a narrow canyon serving as its entrance and exit. Patrolling Hidden Sand Village shinobi lined both sides of the canyon, including those with sensory abilities to discern whether incoming individuals were shinobi or civilians. Just as Orochimaru was about to make a move against the patrolling guards, Sasori stopped him. "The captain of the patrol is one of my people. We can enter Hidden Sand Village openly." Hearing this, Orochimaru smirked. "You've planted quite a number of spies in Hidden Sand Village. Were you planning to become the fifth Kazekage all along and kept those spies as insurance?" Sasori ignored Orochimaru and turned to Byakuya. "Byakuya-sama, defeating Raza is no difficult task for us, but becoming the fifth Kazekage without raising suspicion will be extremely challenging. Granichio won't agree, and Raza certainly won't willingly relinquish his position." Byakuya did not respond directly to Sasori but instead changed the subject. "Your ascension to Kazekage can wait. Right now, we have a show worth watching." After a brief pause, Byakuya formed seals with his hands and created a wood clone. He then instructed Orochimaru, "Orochimaru, leave Hidden Sand Village with my clone and proceed as planned. Sasori and I will find some entertainment." "Entertainment?" Orochimaru squinted slightly, his curiosity piqued. However, since Byakuya had spoken, he obediently complied, leaving only a few small creatures to gather intelligence for him. After Orochimaru and the wood clone departed, Sasori turned to Byakuya curiously. "Byakuya-sama, what entertainment could Hidden Sand Village possibly offer that pleases you so much?" Byakuya glanced toward the location where the Jinchuriki was held and chuckled coldly. "Why, a heartwarming family drama, of course. I never expected Hidden Sand Village to not only neglect their own Jinchuriki but also send shinobi to assassinate him. Raza really is out of his mind. Raza sent someone to assassinate the One-Tails Jinchuriki? Seisaori's face turned stiff from confusion. He couldn't understand why Raza would do such a thing. Also, wasn't the Jinchuriki supposed to be the monk Bunpaku? When did that change? He thought Bunpaku was his rival. Although Bunpaku seemed mild-mannered and willingly confined himself in the Temple of Wind, Seisaori knew the monk was actually the strongest shinobi in Hidden Sand Village at the time. Now that Bunpaku was gone, the village's strength was bound to drop significantly. 10 minutes later, Byakuya and Seisaori reached the place where the Jinchuriki was confined. The area was desolate, with only a handful of guards stationed nearby, clearly, an opportunity deliberately left for someone to carry out an assassination attempt. Sensing the One-Tails chakra lingering in the air, Seisaori wasn't shocked by the power of the tail beast but by Byakuya's incredible sensory abilities. Even from over 10 kilometers away, Byakuya could sense the One-Tails chakra. This implied that any shinobi targeted by Byakuya would have no chance of escape. Noticing Seisaori's emotional fluctuation, Byakuya said nothing. After performing the Mayfly Jutsu, Byakuya led Seisaori underground, tunneling through solid earth to appear directly in Gaara's room. Gaara, with his dark circles and lifeless demeanor, resembled a perpetually overworked corporate employee, devoid of any vitality typical of a child. It wasn't that Gaara didn't want to sleep, various reasons made it impossible for him to rest peacefully. His only relief came from brief naps that never lasted more than an hour. Coupled with Shukaku's constant interference and his father Raza's loving assassination attempts, Gaara was perpetually on the brink of collapse, ready to lose control at any moment. While Byakuya observed Gaara, Seisaori silently did the same. From Gaara, Seisaori sensed a kindred spirit. He remembered being just as despondent after losing his parents. Memories of those days stirred in Seisaori's mind, making his emotions increasingly complex. He had thought transforming himself into a puppet would eliminate these human emotions, but returning to his hometown and seeing familiar streets had reawakened them. A few minutes later, Gaara, who had been in a state of light slumber, noticed the presence of shinobi in his room. Instinctively, he grabbed a handful of sand and warily observed Byakuya and Seisaori. He had been attacked too many times before. Were these two the latest assassins? If they truly bore ill intent, should he deal with them as he had dealt with others? Seeing that Gaara was awake, Byakuya smiled and greeted him. "Hello, Gaara. Nice to meet you. I look forward to working with you in the future." Working together? Gaara's face was filled with confusion. He could sense no killing intent from Byakuya, suggesting the man wasn't an assassin. Perhaps he had come simply to meet him. But Gaara was Hidden Sand Village's Jinchuriki, the village's most dangerous individual. Who would risk approaching him to form a friendship? Was this a new assassination tactic, starting with kind words before striking? Seeing Gaara's guarded expression, Byakuya chuckled. "Relax, little pal. Neither of us is here to assassinate you. In fact, Raza doesn't have the authority to command us. He's just a mere Kazekage." Gaara narrowed his eyes. Raza was his father and the leader of Hidden Sand Village. Though Gaara had attended the Ninja Academy for only a few years, he knew the Kazekage held a significant position in the ninja world. For these two to dismiss Raza as unimportant, they must be shinobi from another village. "You think the Kazekage is insignificant? Who are you, and why have you come to Hidden Sand Village? What's your purpose?" Gaara demanded. Byakuya glanced at Gaara and pointed to Seisaori. "I'm not a Hidden Sand Village shinobi, but he certainly is. As for our purpose..." After a brief pause, Byakuya continued, "I'm here to visit the village. He's here to become the Kazekage. Raza has held the position long enough, so it's time for a change." "You're here to become the Kazekage?" Gaara's expression shifted, his gaze growing cold as he stared at Byakuya and Seisaori. "Although I don't fully understand who you are, you're definitely enemies of Hidden Sand Village." As he spoke, Gaara began to radiate the One-Tail's violent chakra, distorting the air around him. Seeing this, Byakuya wasted no time. Golden chains emerged from his back, binding Gaara midair and completely draining him of chakra. After lowering Gaara back down, Byakuya smiled and said, "A child shouldn't let emotions take over when facing problems. What would you do if you encountered an opponent you couldn't defeat? I'm clearly someone you can't handle. By the way, you said something about assassin earlier, eh? Well, little pal, we're not the assassins, but the real ones are coming soon. I suspect they might be someone familiar to you, perhaps even a relative. Once you deal with the attackers, we can talk again." Before Gaara could respond, Byakuya and Seisaori vanished from the room. Left alone, Gaara looked unsettled, his expression shifting unpredictably. The shinobi who had just appeared were too powerful, so strong that even Shukaku's chakra was suppressed in an instant. Who were they to possess such terrifying strength? Gaara didn't have time to dwell on the question, he could already hear footsteps approaching from outside. Chapter 307, I was once a child too. Under the pale moonlight, Gaara quickly spotted the figure lurking outside his room. The person wore a hidden Sand Village forehead protector and the attire of an Anbu operative, revealing only part of their face, making it hard to discern their true identity. Despite this, Gaara recognized the person. It was Yoshimaru, his uncle, one of the few people in the village who cared for him. If this had been just a few hours earlier, Gaara would have been delighted to see Yoshimaru. Yoshimaru was different from the other villagers. He told Gaara stories of brave shinobi and encouraged him to resist Shukaku's influence, urging him to take control of his destiny. But earlier that evening, two mysterious figures had intruded into his room. They subdued him with overwhelming power and told him something he found hard to believe, that tonight, a close confidant of his would attempt to assassinate him. If that information was true, then the assassin tonight could only be Yoshimaru. Feeling anxious and uncertain, Gaara opened his door and looked at Yoshimaru. Yoshimaru glanced into Gaara's room, then casually sat down in a corner. With a sigh, he said, Gaara, this will be the last time I visit you. Why? Are you going on a mission, Uncle Yoshimaru? Yoshimaru nodded, his gaze lingering briefly on the gourd on Gaara's back before he said, you could say it's a mission. I am about to carry out a very dangerous plan. Whether it succeeds or fails, you won't see me again. Gaara sensed that something was wrong. Instinctively stepping back, he bumped into the wall behind him. Why would you say that, uncle? You're one of the strongest shinobi in the village. What mission could be too dangerous for you? Yoshimaru took a step forward, forcing Gaara into the corner. Slowly, he said, ordinary missions wouldn't be a problem for a shinobi of my level, but dealing with a Jinchuriki is another matter. The power of a Jinchuriki far exceeds that of a regular shinobi. Even now, I have no guarantee of success. Gaara froze. Staring into Yoshimaru's eyes, he cautiously asked, did father order you to get rid of me? Just because I'm not the kind of Jinchuriki he wants? Because I don't meet his standards? Yoshimaru shook his head and said, this has nothing to do with Raza. I want to kill you. Don't you know? Your birth caused Karura's death, my beloved sister. If not for you, Karura would still be alive. Raza wouldn't have lost his wife, and Kankuro and Temari wouldn't have lost their mother. Your existence was a mistake from the very beginning. As he spoke, Yoshimaru's tone grew increasingly intense, his eyes wild. He pulled out a kunai from his pouch and thrust it toward Gaara's throat. Just before the blade made contact, a clump of sand blocked the attack. Seeing the sand automatically protecting Gaara, Yoshimaru's eyes flickered. He quickly formed a series of seals and unleashed several advanced wind-style techniques. Blades of translucent wind took shape and shot toward Gaara. Gaara simply waved his hand, and the sand intercepted the wind blades. Staring at Yoshimaru, he said firmly, Uncle Yoshimaru, my birth wasn't a mistake. I didn't kill my mother. Yoshimaru's expression remained blank. Before coming here, he had steeled himself for this moment. To force out Gaara's latent potential, he was prepared to say anything, no matter how cruel. Only this way could Gaara's value as a Jinchuriki be fully realized, ensuring he remained Shukaku's host. After 2 rounds of probing attacks, their battle spilled outside the room. One was a hidden Sand Village elite jonin, the other was a Jinchuriki host to Shukaku. The clash between uncle and nephew caused quite a commotion, even shaking the ground. Not far away, Byakuya and Seisaori watched the fight unfold. For them, a jonin-level skirmish was mildly entertaining but ultimately unimpressive. In his current state, without entering full-tail beast mode, Gaara was just a child protected by his mother's chakra. He could borrow some of Shukaku's chakra, but doing so would drive him to lose control of his sanity. In contrast, Yoshimaru's abilities paled in comparison. While being a jonin was respectable within the ninja world, it was unimpressive in the Akatsuki, an organization filled with powerhouses. A mere jonin was at best a peripheral member, suitable for running errands. Byakuya watched Gaara and Yoshimaru's battle with interest. He had no intention of interfering, he was just enjoying the show. Besides, he was curious to see how Seisaori would handle his relationship with Gaara. To secure the position of Kazekage, one needed more than the elder's approval, control over the Jinchuriki was essential. After all, Jinchuriki were the ultimate weapons of mass destruction for the hidden villages. As he observed the fight, Seisaori seemed distracted. From Gaara's current expression, Seisaori could sense the pain and helplessness buried deep in the boy's heart. He himself had felt a similar despair when he learned of his parents' deaths. Back then, he had a clear goal, to avenge his parents. That purpose had kept him going, driving him to regain his composure quickly. However, things hadn't turned out as he'd hoped. Just when he was ready to go to the front lines and take revenge, the village signed a peace treaty with the Hidden Leaf. A few years later, his nemesis, Sakamo Hatake, better known as Hidden Leaf Village's White Fang, died in his home under ridiculous circumstances. With his enemy gone and no reason to continue, Sasori lost his purpose in life. He buried himself in the art of puppetry, eventually killing the third Kazekage, the one who had signed the treaty, and leaving Hidden Sand Village behind. Now, standing before him was a child with a story eerily similar to his own. This boy was also the target of his mission, the one-tailed Jinchuriki, whose tailed beast was destined to be extracted and sealed into the demonic statue of the Outer Path. As countless thoughts raced through Sasori's mind, he suddenly disappeared from his spot. Haruko, his puppet body, moved at incredible speed, appearing behind Yoshimaru in an instant. The sharp tail of Haruko wrapped around Yoshimaru and smashed him into the ground with brutal force. Sasori's unexpected intervention immediately caught the attention of both Yoshimaru and Gaara. Yoshimaru was shocked to discover such a powerful ninja hidden nearby, while Gaara was surprised that Sasori would act at this moment. After rolling across the ground, Yoshimaru struggled to his feet, his eyes locked on Sasori. Though he didn't recognize Sasori's altered appearance, the design of Haruko gave him a clue. It had to be a puppet master, a profession unique to Hidden Sand Village. Could it be that Raza had sent another puppet master besides him? Had Raza's promises been lies as well? Was tonight's mission to ensure Gaara's death so they could replace him with a new Jinchuriki? Chapter 308, an invitation from Orochimaru. Raza wants to break his promise and deal with Gaara tonight? This thought crossed Yoshimaru's mind as he wiped the blood from his lips. Clutching his kunai tightly, he turned to Gaara and said, "Gaara, he is here to assassinate you. Quickly, hide. I'll hold him off." Gaara let out a cold laugh, his gaze fixed on Yoshimaru. "Uncle, aren't you here to kill me too? Why don't the two of you team up? It'd be easier to get rid of the burden that's been a curse since birth." Sweat beaded on Yoshimaru's forehead. He didn't know how to explain. Indeed, he had come tonight with the intent to kill Gaara. But his goal wasn't to end Gaara's life, it was to provoke him into controlling Shukaku. Once Gaara harnessed enough power, Yoshimaru had planned to deliberately expose a fatal opening and sacrifice himself. Left with no choice, Yoshimaru said, "Karura loved you until her last breath. If not, why would the sand and chakra she left behind continue to protect you? Please, listen to me. Run far away from this village and find a new life elsewhere." Hearing this, Gaara's expression shifted. But instead of escaping, he remained rooted, yearning for more information about his mother. Seeing this, Yoshimaru gritted his teeth and, abandoning further explanations, charged at Sasori. He believed that, combined with Gaara's abilities, they might stand a chance of defeating this puppet master. But if Raza had indeed orchestrated tonight's events to deal with Gaara, defeating Sasori would mean little. They wouldn't escape Raza's pursuit. The clash between metal rang out as Yoshimaru's kunai snapped against Haruko's impenetrable exterior. He marveled at the puppet's durability, simultaneously scanning for the puppeteer. Typically, puppet masters operated from a distance, often hidden underground, in blind spots, or camouflaged as part of their puppets. Failing to locate Sasori with ninjutsu, Yoshimaru's attention returned to Haruko. A puppet of such size could easily conceal its operator within. If he could break through Haruko's defenses, he might secure victory. But before Yoshimaru could act, Sasori calmly retrieved a summoning scroll and called forth over a dozen puppets. The swarm of puppets overwhelmed Yoshimaru, submerging him in a sea of sand and wood. Having subdued Yoshimaru, Sasori refrained from killing him outright. Instead, he dragged Yoshimaru toward Gaara and threw him to the ground, his tone laced with mockery. "Gaara, if you have questions, ask him now. He won't dare lie to you." Gaara glanced at Yoshimaru before turning his icy gaze on Sasori. "Why are you helping me? What do you want from me?" Sasori smirked, his tone indifferent. "I was once a child too. I know there are questions that, if left unanswered, will haunt you forever. I can see it clearly, he doesn't want to kill you. The real assassin lies elsewhere." Sasori's words sank into Gaara's mind. After a long silence, Gaara finally raised his head and muttered, "Thank you." Yoshimaru, too, had heard Sasori's words and was filled with confusion. As his thoughts cleared, his mind raced to piece together the clues from their brief encounter. Who was this man? What was his true identity? What was his ultimate goal? Despite his efforts, Yoshimaru couldn't unravel the mystery. This puppet master didn't seem to belong to the village. But could any other village produce a puppet master of such skill? Or was he a rogue ninja, a deserter unaffiliated with Raza's hidden plans? As Yoshimaru was about to continue deducing Sasori's identity, Gaara stepped closer, his voice cold and commanding. "Uncle Yoshimaru, tell me everything you know. Or you will regret it." After a busy day, the fourth Kazekage stretched his back and gazed into the distance. His eyes seemed to pierce through space, seeing Temari diligently training her wind-style ninjutsu at home, Kankuro engrossed in his study of puppetry, and Gaara undergoing a crucial test of his abilities. Temari, Kankuro, and Gaara, each represented a distinct facet of Hidden Sand Village's strength, and all were the children of the fourth Kazekage. Temari symbolized the traditional Hidden Sand Village shinobi, adept in wind-style jutsu and direct combat techniques. She epitomized the mainstream type of shinobi that many in the village aspired to become. Kankuro represented the puppeteer's craft, a profession that didn't require elemental affinities but demanded mastery in chakra control and assassination skills. Although rare, puppeteers held a fearsome reputation on the battlefield. With sufficient puppet supplies, a single puppeteer could perform the work of several shinobi, maintaining battle readiness for extended periods and easing offensive pressure. Gaara, on the other hand, embodied the terrifying might of a Jinchuriki. Hidden Sand Village was one of the first villages to utilize Jinchuriki as living weapons. In the vast deserts of the Land of Wind, Shukaku's overwhelming battlefield control made Hidden Sand Village a force to reckon with. This power was a key reason why, despite losing battles, the village had never fallen. The fourth Kazekage believed that with strict guidance and thorough training, his 3 children would grow into formidable tools for the village. Once all 3 reached adulthood, he envisioned them as shadow-level powerhouses bound by blood ties, shinobi who would never betray him. At that point, he could break free of Hidden Leaf Village as shadow and elevate Hidden Sand Village to the position of the most powerful hidden village. Pulling himself from these grandiose thoughts, the Kazekage sipped a strong coffee, preparing for another night of mining operations. The funds he accumulated would lay the foundation for Hidden Sand Village's future dominance. At that moment, an Anbu operative hurried in and presented a message. Kazekage-sama, this is a message from a merchant in the village. He wants to purchase a large quantity of our ore. A big client? The Kazekage licked his lips. He had been troubled by the surplus of ores in the village. If they couldn't be converted into funds, they would merely waste valuable storage space. But his attention soon shifted to the serpent-shaped emblem at the bottom right corner of the message, and his brow furrowed. Few shinobi in the ninja world used a serpent insignia. Among those, one figure stood out, Orochimaru, a former adversary he had encountered on the battlefield. In the past, Orochimaru had been a thorn in his side, complicating his plans. After Orochimaru's defection from Hidden Leaf Village, the Kazekage had privately reached out, attempting to recruit him into Hidden Sand Village's fold. But Orochimaru had declined the offer. Now, with Orochimaru reaching out again, the Kazekage couldn't help but wonder about his true intentions. What is that snake up to this time? He muttered, suspicion flashing in his eyes. Still, after some thought, he decided to meet Orochimaru. Shrewd and treacherous as Orochimaru was, the man had one undeniable advantage: he was wealthy. Chapter 309, The Tiger Leaves the Mountain. Under the cover of night, the fourth Kazekage departed Hidden Sand Village and arrived at the appointed sand dune. There, he saw the figure of someone who seemed to be Orochimaru. Upon closer inspection, his brows furrowed. The chakra and aura undoubtedly belonged to Orochimaru, yet the appearance and even the gender were wrong. The Orochimaru he knew was an androgynous man, but now the figure before him was clearly female. Noticing the Kazekage's expression, Orochimaru chuckled softly and said, "Long time no see, Kazekage-sama. You look even more composed than the last time we met. I almost didn't recognize you." The Kazekage's expression darkened as he frowned. "Orochimaru, your changes are quite different. Turning from a man into a woman, did you feel your male identity was holding you back? By the way, I am still straight." Orochimaru shook their head with a sly grin. "I wouldn't say that, but changing things up every now and then is refreshing. If Kazekage-sama ever wishes to explore such a transformation, I'd be more than happy to assist, free of charge." The Kazekage briefly imagined himself undergoing such a change and felt a shiver of disgust. As a proud man, the mere thought was repulsive, and he understood this as Orochimaru's subtle way of mocking him for being overly cautious and hesitant in his actions. With a cold snort, the Kazekage dismissed the remark. "Let's stick to business. In your letter, you mentioned purchasing a large quantity of Hidden Sand Village's ore. What exactly do you plan to do with it? Forge weapons, create experimental instruments, and sell to other organizations? I have my hands in many endeavors." Orochimaru paused, then fixed the Kazekage with an amused glance. "But how I use the ore doesn't concern you. We're merely buyer and seller, nothing more." The Kazekage's gaze sharpened. "I doubt it's that simple. With your resources, buying refined metals would be more efficient. Why go out of your way to acquire raw ore from us?" Raza then smirked. "Let me guess. You've hit a snag, haven't you? That's why you came to me. But let me tell you again. My offer from before still stands. Join Hidden Sand Village, and I'll grant you a deputy's position and the village's protection. Orochimaru chuckled and shook their head. I have no intention of joining Hidden Sand Village. However, I will admit that recent troubles have made life inconvenient. Denzo's men constantly pursue me, destroying several of my bases in the Land of Fire. But this time, I've come to propose a collaboration. Let's meddle in the ongoing war between Hidden Stones Village and Hidden Leaf Village. The Kazekage wasn't surprised by Orochimaru's rejection. Someone like Orochimaru, who had the nerve to defect from Hidden Leaf Village, would never willingly live under another's rule. His repeated offers to recruit Orochimaru were more about humiliating a former adversary. In truth, if Orochimaru ever did agree to join Hidden Sand Village, the Kazekage would have to assign significant manpower just to monitor him. Any leaks of such an alliance would also provoke Hidden Leaf Village's ire, creating more problems than benefits. The mention of collaboration piqued the Kazekage's interest, but it also made him cautious. Are you planning to help Hidden Stones Village against Hidden Leaf Village or seize the opportunity to strike at Hidden Leaf Village yourself? Orochimaru's ambiguous plans left him pondering. If this partnership couldn't aid Hidden Sand Village in breaking free from its shackles, any actions taken would be trivial in the grand scheme of things. What's in it for Hidden Sand Village? The Kazekage finally asked. Orochimaru smiled knowingly. Freedom from your alliance with Hidden Leaf Village and the power to control the daimyo of the Land of Wind. These past years since the Third Shinobi War, the daimyo has been giving Hidden Sand Village nothing but trouble, hasn't he? The words hit a nerve, causing the Kazekage couldn't help but press further. How do you plan to help us sever our ties with Hidden Leaf Village and gain control over the daimyo? Orochimaru's grin widened. It's simple. If the daimyo faces a life-threatening crisis, Hidden Sand Village will have every reason to intervene. Once you've rescued him, you can either detain or monitor him at your leisure. The Kazekage's eyes glinted with understanding, and he let out a low chuckle. You're not worried I'll take this method and have my people stage an attack on the daimyo without involving you? Orochimaru shook their head, unfazed. Other than me, no one else has the capability to assist you in subjugating the daimyo. And if our talks fall apart, I'll personally ensure the daimyo doesn't live to see another sunrise. The Kazekage's gaze turned sharp and dangerous at Orochimaru's threat, a tense silence hanging in the air. The fourth Kazekage understood that Orochimaru wasn't merely bluffing. Orochimaru indeed had both the means and motive to assassinate the daimyo. Should chaos erupt on the daimyo's end, the entire Land of Wind would descend into disorder. In such a scenario, Hidden Leaf Village would undoubtedly interfere with the Land of Wind's affairs. However, if Orochimaru were the perpetrator, the outcome would be entirely different. To avoid suspicion, Hidden Leaf Village would willingly abstain from meddling in the Land of Wind's internal issues. Furthermore, Hidden Sand Village could leverage the moral high ground to pressure Hidden Leaf Village diplomatically. After a moment's contemplation, the Kazekage spoke. I must admit, your proposal is tempting. But more than the benefits to Hidden Sand Village, I'm curious, what's in it for you? If you stand to gain nothing, I'd find it hard to trust even the infamous Orochimaru. Orochimaru paused for a second, his expression darkening as bloodlust flickered in his eyes. His voice grew low and menacing. I want to eliminate Denzo for betraying me and prove to Hiruzen Sarutobi that I am the rightful candidate for the position of Hokage. Losing to Minato Namikaze was one thing, but even after Minato's death, he clings stubbornly to the title. Seeing the fierce determination in Orochimaru's eyes, the Kazekage began to believe him. He realized this partnership was no mere lip service. Orochimaru was genuinely committed to their collaboration. As someone who had himself aspired to power, the Kazekage understood Orochimaru's resentment well. Before becoming the fourth Kazekage, he had set his sights on the position. After the third Kazekage's untimely death, he had invested considerable effort and paid a steep price to defeat his rival, Bakura, ultimately sending her to the Pure Land. Sympathizing with Orochimaru's ambition, the Kazekage saw an opportunity to use him to achieve his own goals. After composing himself, Orochimaru looked at the Kazekage and said, Kazekage-sama, partnering with me will prove to be the wisest decision you've made. For now, though, let's start with the first step, mineral trade. I've heard much about the Land of Wind's abundant ore reserves. If the quality is as good as claimed, we can proceed with our first collaboration. The Kazekage gestured for Orochimaru to follow and smiled. The quality of Hidden Sand Village's ore is impeccable. Come with me to the mines, and you'll see for yourself. Chapter 310, The Rampage and Gaara assassination was not my uncle's intention. Uncle Yashimaru loves me. The real mastermind behind this attempt is none other than the fourth Kazekage, my father. Under Sasori's coercion, Yoshimaru revealed the truth behind the assassination attempt. Upon learning the truth, Gaara's emotions did not stabilize. Instead, they spiraled further into chaos. It wasn't Yoshimaru who deemed Gaara's birth a curse, but rather the fourth Kazekage, Raza. Furthermore, all the assassination attempts over the years had been ordered by Raza. As these thoughts turned in his mind, Gaara let out a cold laugh, recalling every interaction he had with Raza. Since childhood, Raza had never shown him kindness. Not only had he imposed severe training regimens on Gaara, but he had also forbidden Gaara from addressing him as father in public, insisting on Kazekage-sama instead. In his naivety, Gaara had thought this was Raza's way of being impartial. Now, it was clear, Raza had never regarded him as a son but merely as a weapon for the village. As a Jinchuriki, his successes were expected, and his failures only raised the question of replacing him. Under Gaara's piercing gaze, Yoshimaru regretted revealing the truth. Gaara was teetering on the brink of losing control, his remaining sanity was hanging by a thread. If Yoshimaru had chosen to take his own life earlier, Gaara would have remained unaware of the truth, continuing to trust Raza and live on as a Jinchuriki. Sasori, too, was visibly affected as he listened to the account. Having experienced parental love and care in his childhood, he was shocked to witness such cruelty, a father turning his own child into a Jinchuriki and making contingency plans to replace him, even sending assassins after him. This thought softened Sasori's gaze toward Gaara. This was a child far more tragic than himself. Though Sasori had lost his parents, he knew their love was real. It was only due to misfortune that he had lost them. Gaara's pain, however, stemmed from his closest kin. Kneeling down, Sasori extended his metallic hand to pat Gaara's head, attempting to soothe his unstable emotions. However, Sasori found himself at a loss for words. Having never comforted anyone before, he could only awkwardly mutter, "Gaara, at least someone other than Raza still loves you." Unfortunately, Gaara was too far gone to hear Sasori's words. Losing control of his emotions, Shukaku seized the opportunity to take over. As Shukaku's chakra poured out like a torrential flood, Gaara instinctively resorted to self-sealing, losing consciousness. With Gaara's body now under Shukaku's control, the beast roared with laughter as its form expanded to over 30 meters tall in mere seconds. Glaring down at Yoshimaru and Sasori, Shukaku sneered, "Thanks for breaking this brat's spirit. Now that I have control, I'll reward you with a painless death." Before finishing its sentence, Shukaku raised its massive hand and smashed it down, creating a localized sandstorm. Yoshimaru, unwilling to face the attack head-on, cast a wind-based technique to lighten himself and leaped several hundred meters away. Sasori, however, did not retreat. He maneuvered Hiroko to leap onto Shukaku's arm, climbing rapidly to its head. There, he pried open Shukaku's skull and stuffed several puppets loaded with explosive tags inside. Boom! A chain of explosions erupted from within Shukaku, creating shockwaves that shook its massive body. Its form visibly shrank as it reeled from the impact. Realizing Sasori's strength, Shukaku became cautious. This puppet master was no ordinary shinobi, he posed a genuine threat. Shukaku understood it needed to take the fight seriously and escape Hidden Sand Village before more reinforcements arrived. Recalling its last defeat at the hands of Hidden Sand Village's magnet-style users, Shukaku resolved not to be captured again. Channeling its chakra, Shukaku formed hand signs and unleashed a powerful wind-style technique. Though small compared to its colossal form, the winds it summoned were equivalent to a Category 8 typhoon, capable of raising sandstorms and slicing through stone. Frowning, Sasori retrieved a second scroll and summoned over 20 puppets, each capable of using ninjutsu to bridge the gap in size and power. With a single thought, Sasori commanded the puppets to unleash a barrage of ninjutsu. The battlefield erupted into a flurry of elemental attacks, with Sasori and Shukaku locked in an even match. Witnessing this, Yoshimaru stood dumbfounded. He had assumed this mysterious puppet master's strength to be on par with an elite Jonin, impressive, but not extraordinary. Yet, Sasori had exceeded all expectations, holding his own against a tailed beast. What astonished Yoshimaru even more was the sheer number of puppets Sasori controlled, over 20. This was a feat even Elder Chio had never achieved, rivaled only by the legendary puppet master Munzman. Could such a prodigy exist in the shinobi world? A name flashed in Yoshimaru's mind, a prodigy listed among Hidden Sand Village's missing ninja. The boy's name was Sasori, grandson of Elder Chio, who had broken numerous records as a puppet master. Could this be the same Sasori? But wasn't Sasori a handsome young boy? How had he turned into a bald, middle-aged man? And why had Sasori suddenly returned to the village, contacting Gaara without alerting anyone? Could he be plotting to dethrone Raza? As these thoughts swirled, Yoshimaru resolved to flee. He needed to spread word of these events, summoning reinforcements and informing Elder Chio of the situation. However, just as Yashimaru prepared to leave, Byakuya placed a firm hand on his shoulder and said calmly, "Hidden Sand Village's shinobi aren't blind or deaf. They're already on their way to assist Sasori. For now, stay and watch this battle. A fight of this caliber is a rare spectacle for someone like you." Chapter 313, The Third Kazekage's Resolve and Sasori's Struggles. The Fourth Kazekage issued an order to Yashimaru to assassinate the Jinchuriki, Gaara. Hearing this, Elder Chio and the gathered sand shinobi froze momentarily before they displayed expressions of disbelief. Who was Gaara? Beyond being the one-tailed Jinchuriki, he was the fourth Kazekage's son. How could the Kazekage give such an order, especially against his own child, a Jinchuriki vital to the village? And as for the assassin? The choice seemed even more absurd. Everyone in Hidden Sand Village knew Yashimaru was Gaara's brother, Gaara's uncle. How could he possibly undertake a mission to kill the Jinchuriki? Rejecting Sasori's statement outright, the Sand Shinobi quickly concocted their own theory. The assassin targeting Gaara tonight couldn't be anyone else, it must have been Sasori himself. Perhaps an unexpected event during the attempt caused Shukaku to momentarily break free, leading to the earlier battle. Sasori's earlier words were likely fabricated lies, made on the spot to evade capture. Elder Chio shared similar suspicions. However, after Sasori handed over Gaara, she started to doubt her assumptions. Could it be that Sasori wasn't here for the Jinchuriki at all and had simply returned to the village out of curiosity? After all, if Sasori truly intended to target Shukaku, he wouldn't need to confront it head-on. Nor would he expose the Kazekage puppet, risking unnecessary danger. Still, Elder Chio was not sure about letting Sasori leave the village. Sasori's presence was riddled with too many mysteries. Where had he been all these years? Why had he turned the Kazekage into a puppet? Why had he infiltrated the village? These questions demanded answers. Elder Chio looked at Sasori and said, "I'll send it to Yashimaru to determine whether your story holds any truth." Sasori scoffed, replying, "What does it matter if it's true or false? Do you really intend to let me leave Hidden Sand Village?" Chio faltered. No matter the truth, she had no intention of allowing Sasori, who had been absent from the village for years, to walk away freely. As Chio hesitated to respond, several Sand Shinobi arrived with Yashimaru in tow. Clearing her throat, Chio turned to Yashimaru and asked, "I ask you, did you come here tonight to assassinate the Jinchuriki, Gaara?" Yashimaru froze, unsure how to respond. Telling the truth would tarnish the fourth Kazekage's image and possibly invite his wrath on both himself and Gaara. Lying, however, would weigh on his conscience and might still lead to Sasori targeting Gaara in the future. Sasori clearly had the capability to kill the Jinchuriki if he so desired. As Yashimaru wrestled with his decision, his eyes caught sight of White Knight, disguised among the crowd. Taking a deep breath, he answered, "Elder Chio, I was indeed carrying out a mission to deal with Gaara." Chio narrowed her eyes and extended her chakra strings, binding Yashimaru. "Who sent you to deal with Gaara?" Noticing White Knight disappear into the crowd, Yashimaru felt emboldened and revealed, "It was Lord Forth. He ordered me to use assassination as a means to awaken Gaara's potential. If Gaara couldn't wield Shukaku's power, he was to be killed." Chio frowned. Her chakra strings told her Yashimaru wasn't lying. But why would Raza send someone to assassinate Gaara? And why hadn't Yashimaru refused such a mission? She looked at Yashimaru again, and he remained silent, as if sensing her thoughts. With a heavy sigh, Chio thought back to her understanding of Raza's character. If this was the truth, it was entirely plausible. Raza was the type of ninja who would sacrifice anything for the sake of the village. To Raza, whether it was an ordinary shinobi or his own child, they were all part of Hidden Sand Village. They could be abandoned or sacrificed whenever necessary. But to deliberately send someone to assassinate Gaara as a way of forcing him to adapt to Shukaku's power? Such actions were outrageous. If something had gone wrong with Gaara, leading to Shukaku breaking free, the resulting chaos would rival the Nine Tails rampage in the Hidden Leaf. After a long silence, Sasori spoke calmly, "Old woman, does this prove my innocence? I had no intention of targeting the Jinchuriki. It was Gaara who lost control and sought me out." Without waiting for a reply, Sasori turned and walked toward the chamber where Gaara was confined, locking himself inside. Chio opened her mouth, wanting to apologize to Sasori, but the words wouldn't come. She'd never been skilled at communicating with her grandson and couldn't understand his thoughts. Even if Sasori hadn't attacked Gaara this time, there were still the unresolved matters of his disappearance and the Kazekage puppet. Sasori was, after all, still a Sand Shinobi. Fortunately, Sasori hadn't left the village, merely isolating himself in his usual manner. As Sasori shut himself in the chamber, The sand shinobi exchanged complicated looks, beginning to doubt their earlier accusations. Was Seisaori truly the one who killed the third Kazekage? Could there be another explanation for his actions? Sensing the shift in mood, White Knight, disguised as a sand ninja, spoke up. Everyone, could it be that we've misunderstood Seisaori? Just because the Kazekage puppet is in his possession doesn't necessarily mean he killed the third Kazekage. What if there were other circumstances at play? Other circumstances? White Knight's question spurred the shinobi to ponder alternative scenarios. I wonder, White Knight continued, if perhaps Seisaori and the third Kazekage faced a powerful enemy together. After a grueling battle, they managed to repel the threat, but the third Kazekage succumbed to his injuries. In his final moments, the third Kazekage might have requested Seisaori to turn him into a puppet. That way, even in death, he could continue to protect Hidden Sand Village. White Knight's suggestion struck a chord. Although the creation of human puppets was taboo, the third Kazekage was known as a selfless leader. It wasn't inconceivable that he would make such a request for the sake of the village. One by one, the sand shinobi began nodding, considering this unexpected but strangely plausible possibility. Chapter 311, The Scorpion in Adversity. Yoshimaru spun around sharply, breaking out in a cold sweat upon spotting Byakuya. He had no idea who this person was, but one thing was certain, they were definitely not a sand ninja. Most likely, this individual was a companion of Seisaori. Judging by their composed demeanor, they were highly probable Akage-level strength. In the presence of such a powerful individual, Yoshimaru realized he had no chance to resist or escape. All he could do was obediently follow the stranger's instructions and witness this rare battle unfold. While watching the fight, Yoshimaru couldn't help but glance back at Byakuya repeatedly. He felt a sense of relief every time he realized Byakuya wasn't paying him any attention. Meanwhile, he began speculating about the identity of this mysterious young man. On the other hand, Byakuya also noticed Yoshimaru's glances but paid them no mind. The reason Byakuya had asked Yoshimaru to stay was primarily to ensure that he wouldn't be killed in the aftermath of the battle. For someone of Jonin-level strength, in a fight between Seisaori and Shukaku, he was little more than a somewhat sturdier pawn. Moreover, once Seisaori became the fifth Kazekage, he would need a Jonin to handle day-to-day matters. Otherwise, given Seisaori's personality, he would inevitably abandon the duties of the Kazekage and hide away in his lab to study puppetry. If that happened, Hidden Sand Village Akage would no longer be able to consistently supply Byakuya with the rewards he desired. At this moment, Shukaku, who was battling Seisaori, noticed Byakuya and Yoshimaru. After taking a deep breath, Shukaku charged up and unleashed its sterling air bullet straight at them. Feeling the pressure rushing toward him, Yoshimaru closed his eyes. It would be nearly impossible to dodge Shukaku's attack with his abilities. The best he could do would be to endure it and suffer grave injuries. However, in the next moment, Yoshimaru witnessed a scene that would be etched into his memory forever. Byakuya raised his hand and effortlessly caught Shukaku's drilling air bullet. Then, as if nothing had happened, he sat back down on the cliffside, continuing to leisurely observe the battle. A dumbfounded Yoshimaru approached Byakuya and stammered, "You just caught Shukaku's attack, an attack strong enough to destroy boulders, with your bare hand?" Byakuya glanced at Yoshimaru and replied calmly, "Is Shukaku really that strong? Hey, he's nothing more than a raccoon. No matter how much power he wields, he's still just a stupid beast." Hearing this, Yoshimaru fell silent, unsure of how to respond. Shukaku was considered Hidden Sand Village Akage's strongest weapon. Every Kazekage in history had sought to control Shukaku, using its power to defeat the village's enemies. Yet here was someone dismissing the creature, which Hidden Sand Village Akage revered as their greatest asset, as nothing more than a foolish beast. Yoshimaru couldn't tell if his understanding was too narrow or if Byakuya's strength was beyond comprehension. But one thing was clear, tonight would mark a turning point for Hidden Sand Village Akage. Whether it was the mysterious puppet master, likely Seisaori, or the enigmatic young man before him, their arrival would shatter the village's tranquility and plunge its future into uncertainty. As time passed, more and more sand ninja began to notice the commotion from Seisaori and Shukaku's battle. Upon climbing onto the rooftop and witnessing the towering form of Shukaku, akin to a mountain, as well as Seisaori battling it, the sand ninja were filled with confusion. First, they could confirm that the earth-toned monster was indeed their village's one-tailed beast, Shukaku. But wasn't Shukaku sealed inside Gaara? Why was it suddenly outside the village? Did Shukaku overtake Gaara's mind, or was there some other reason? Second, who was the ninja fighting Shukaku? It clearly wasn't the Kazekage, Raza. With questions swirling in their minds, the sand ninja assembled a large group and advanced toward the battle site. Before long, They saw Sasori and Shukaku engaged in combat on the desert sands. Even from a considerable distance, they could clearly see Sasori and the numerous puppets he was controlling. The sight left the sand ninja even more puzzled. They didn't recognize this puppet master battling Shukaku, and the sheer number and quality of the puppets he wielded were beyond belief. Since when did puppets have the capability to battle a tailed beast? As the sand ninja wrestled with their doubts, Shukaku noticed them and began unleashing indiscriminate wind-style techniques in all directions as though chakra was of no consequence. Several sand ninjas, unable to react in time, were struck by the techniques and buried in the desert sands. With multiple comrades incapacitated, the remaining sand ninja grew serious. They realized they weren't dealing with an ordinary enemy but a tailed beast considered a force of nature. After a brief exchange of glances, they devised a strategy. One group would retreat to call for reinforcements, another would begin setting up a sealing formation at the site, and the remaining group would directly engage Shukaku to buy time. Setting up the sealing formation wouldn't take long, about 10 minutes, but that was more than enough time for Shukaku to kill them dozens of times over. As Shukaku's attacks neared the ninja preparing the formation, Sasori quickly deployed his puppets to intercept the attacks midair. Using chakra transmission, he then commanded, "You useless burdens, don't interfere with my battle against Shukaku. Get out of here, now." Hearing this, the rescued sand ninja looked at Sasori with gratitude in their eyes before promptly retreating. Sasori was right, they were nothing but dead weight in this battle. However, they couldn't ignore a troubling fact: human chakra is limited, while a tailed beast's chakra is nearly infinite. Though the puppet master seemed capable of holding off Shukaku for now, he would undoubtedly tire as time passed, ultimately leading to his defeat. Thinking this, one of the sand ninja shouted to Sasori, "Puppet master, retreat for now. If this continues, you won't last much longer. Once you fall, none of us will be able to stop Shukaku. Wait for Lord Kazekage to arrive, he'll definitely be able to handle Shukaku." "You mean that coward, the fourth Kazekage? I don't need Raz's help. Let him stay in the mines, clinging to his impossible dreams." Sasori of the Red Sand snorted coldly, his tone dripping with disdain for the fourth Kazekage. Hearing this, the surrounding sand ninja exchanged uneasy glances. They didn't recognize this puppet master, but from his words, it was clear he harbored significant resentment toward Raza. Could he be one of Chio's subordinates or perhaps a member of another faction? Seizing the moment when Sasori was distracted, Shukaku swept up all the puppets on the ground and buried them hundreds of meters underground. The immense pressure crushed them all into oblivion. Having lost a large number of puppets in an instant, Sasori's expression turned grim. Without utilizing magnet style, he truly wasn't a match for Shukaku. Neither his human puppets nor mechanical puppets could withstand the catastrophic power of the tailed beast. But deploying his Kazekage puppet now would expose the fact that he had assassinated the third Kazekage. After a moment of deliberation, he pulled out the scroll containing the Kazekage puppet. His decision stemmed partly from a desire to demonstrate his strength and free Gaara from Shukaku's control. It was also rooted in his trust in Byakuya. He believed in Byakuya's judgment and was convinced that if Byakuya intended for him to become the Kazekage of Hidden Sand Village Akagure, then he was destined to be the fifth Kazekage. Chapter 312, The Touching Reunion. After summoning the Kazekage puppet, Sasori utilized magnet style to manipulate the iron sand buried within the earth. The iron sand quickly infiltrated Shukaku's body, rendering the previously nimble beast sluggish. Even basic movements became a struggle. "You've mastered magnet style too?" Shukaku's expression darkened upon sensing the change in his body. As a tailed beast nearly invincible in the desert, there were few things Shukaku feared. Chief among them were the sealing techniques of the Temple of Wind and the magnet style wielded by successive Kazekages. The former could seal him away unconditionally, while the latter made him unbearably heavy and ultimately led to his capture. Thus, Shukaku was in a foul mood when he recognized magnet style. After finally gaining a chance to escape, he had barely begun to savor his freedom in the desert when he encountered a magnet-style user determined to seal him away again. But Shukaku wasn't the only one wearing a grim expression. The sand ninja were equally troubled. When Sasori revealed the Kazekage puppet, the ninjas quickly recognized its origin. This was no ordinary puppet but a rare human puppet, capable of performing ninjutsu because it was crafted from a real body. In the entire ninja world, there were very few magnet-style users, and even fewer who had left behind usable remains. The last known ninja to disappear with magnet style was none other than the third Kazekage. Coupled with the familiar puppet-making techniques on display, they soon connected the dots to Sasori, the once brilliant puppet master. The sand ninja felt grateful that Sasori had stepped forward to protect the village in its moment of crisis. But why had Sasori, missing for so many years, suddenly returned to the village, and with the third Kazekage's human puppet. Could it be confirmed now that Sasori was behind the third Kazekage's disappearance? Sasori noticed the cold stares directed at him but paid them no mind. His focus was entirely on manipulating the Kazekage puppet to seal Shukaku's chakra back into Gaara. Before long, Shukaku's enormous form gradually shrank until it finally disappeared into Gaara's body. Sasori lifted the unconscious Gaara and looked at the sand ninja blocking his path before saying coldly, "Why are you standing in my way? If you want to attack me, go ahead. But anyone who dares to strike me will be treated as an enemy, and I won't show mercy to enemies." The sand ninja didn't move aside. Maki, the leading Jonin, directly confronted him. "Sasori, we're grateful you subdued the rampaging Shukaku, but don't you think you owe us an explanation for this magnet-style puppet?" Sasori furrowed his brows and replied, "What's there to explain? This is a human puppet, something you consider taboo, and it's crafted from the body of the third Kazekage." The third Kazekage? Maki's suspicions were confirmed. He glared at Sasori in anger. "So it really was you? How did you kill the third Kazekage back then? Do you realize your actions caused immense suffering for the entire village?" Sasori glanced at Maki and then began walking toward the other side of the crowd. He had no interest in explaining himself to these sand ninjas. Those who didn't attack him would be ignored, those who did would be dealt with mercilessly. His silence made the sand ninjas' expressions even more tense, their gazes filled with murderous intent as they watched his retreating figure. But Sasori's earlier display of strength, subduing a rampaging tailed beast, made them hesitate. If he could handle Shukaku, dealing with him would be child's play. Even Maki hesitated. Though he was a loyal confidant of the fourth Kazekage and knew stopping Sasori would earn him praise, he wasn't willing to throw his life away. Just as Sasori was about to leave, a group of people appeared to block his path. If it had been anyone else, Sasori might have ignored them or attacked outright. But this time, the person standing before him was none other than Chio, the elder of Hidden Sand Village. Chio was the village's most skilled puppet master and Sasori's grandmother. 10 minutes earlier, Hidden Sand Village's Anbu had realized Shukaku was rampaging and sought the fourth Kazekage's help, only to find he wasn't in his office. Left with no choice, they turned to Chio, who was living in retirement outside the village. Upon hearing about Shukaku's rampage, Chio immediately donned her ninja gear and rushed to the village. She arrived to find the battle already over, with Shukaku resealed. Initially, she assumed it was Raza who had sealed Shukaku. After all, Raza was the only ninja in the village capable of suppressing and sealing Shukaku. However, upon reaching the scene, she discovered the one responsible was an unfamiliar puppet master wielding a magnet-style puppet. More importantly, this puppet was a human puppet. Chio quickly deduced that the puppet's material was none other than the long-missing third Kazekage. These suspicions had lingered in her mind ever since the simultaneous disappearance of Sasori and the third Kazekage. She had refused to believe her once sweet grandson would kill the third Kazekage, especially given his abilities at the time. But the reality was often cruel. Her grandson had killed the third Kazekage and now stood before them with the puppet as proof. The two locked eyes before Sasori stopped in his tracks and, feigning indifference, said, "Elder Chio, are you here to stop me too?" Chio chuckled coldly and replied, "Elder Chio? Sasori, has 10 years been enough for you to forget the manners I taught you?" Unfazed, Sasori responded, "Old hag, even after all this time, you're still meddling in my affairs. Do you think you're any different from those fools who want to fight me?" "I'm not going to fight you," Chio said, glancing at the unconscious Gaara in Sasori's arms. "But why are you holding Hidden Sand Village's Jinchuriki hostage?" "Hostage?" Sasori scoffed, tossing Gaara to Chio. "I was protecting him. If it weren't for me, the Jinchuriki would already be dead." "Protecting him?" Chio raised a brow. "Since when does the Jinchuriki need your protection? Hidden Sand Village can safeguard its own Jinchuriki. By the way, you're not leaving yet, I have many questions for you." "Still as nagging as ever, old hag," Sasori muttered, though he paused. Pointing to a nearby direction, he added, "If you doubt me, ask a ninja named Yoshimaru. He just attempted to assassinate the Jinchuriki under orders from the Kazekage." Chapter 314, We've come at the wrong time. Byakuya's conjecture caused a stir among the Sand Shinobi. Under normal circumstances, upon seeing the Kazekage puppet, the Sand Shinobi would have immediately pursued Sasori as the killer of the third Kazekage. They wouldn't have entertained Byakuya's speculations or analysis. However, moments ago, Sasori had defeated the rampaging Jinchuriki, saving the village from Shukaku's wrath. If Sasori hadn't needed to use the Kazekage puppet to overcome Shukaku, he wouldn't have been surrounded by the crowd in the first place. Given these considerations, doubt began to creep into their minds. Byakuya's theory seemed increasingly plausible, as if they had uncovered the hidden truth of the past. Could this really have been the long-buried truth? Perhaps Sasori and the third Kazekage had both been ambushed. Maybe the third Kazekage had willingly allowed Sasori to turn him into a puppet to protect the village. Hearing the murmurs among the crowd, even Elder Chio began to question whether this could be true. After all, compared to the belief that her grandson had murdered the third Kazekage and become a heinous rogue ninja, Chio preferred to think of him as a good person. However, another pressing question soon arose. If Sasori was truly innocent, why hadn't he returned to the village all these years? Why had he stood by as Hidden Sand Village suffered defeats in the Third Great Ninja War, ultimately becoming a subordinate village to Hidden Leaf Village? Byakuya didn't answer these questions directly. His goal wasn't to provide a definitive answer but to guide the Sand Shinobi and Elder Chio into drawing their own conclusions. Only by arriving at their own answers would they wholeheartedly believe them. Still, Byakuya found himself wondering if there was any truth to his fabricated story. Once this matter was resolved, he thought, he would have to ask Sasori directly. Could it be that Sasori and the third Kazekage had truly been ambushed together back then? Did Sasori really possess the strength to kill the strongest Kazekage at the time? The Sand Shinobi, meanwhile, began speculating among themselves. Some suspected Hidden Leaf Village was responsible for the third Kazekage's disappearance. After all, considering the outcome of the war, Hidden Leaf Village had gained the most from the Sand's losses. Others thought Hidden Cloud's Village might be the culprit. Hidden Cloud's Village, Cloud Village, had been the first to attack the Sand during the war and had a history of underhanded tactics and surprise attacks. It was the most opportunistic of the ninja villages. Still, others pointed fingers at Hidden Stone's Village and Hidden Mist Village. Hidden Stone's villages Onoki, as well as their Four Tails and Five Tails Jinchuriki, were formidable forces capable of killing the third Kazekage. As for the Hidden Mist Village, their 7 ninja swordsmen were a notorious team specializing in targeting Kage-level shinobi. The debates went on for a long time, but no one could come to a definitive conclusion. For now, their only course of action was to keep monitoring Gaara and Sasori while awaiting the arrival of the 4th Kazekage to make the final decision. After all, the Kazekage was the highest authority in Hidden Sand Village, and though Elder Chio was highly respected, she had long since retired. Half an hour passed, but Elder Chio and the Sand Shinobi still saw no sign of the 4th Kazekage. This absence filled them with unease, sparking fears that he might have met with misfortune. It brought to mind the mysterious disappearance of both the third Kazekage and Sasori years ago, which had ultimately resulted in the confirmation of their deaths. After a moment of contemplation, Elder Chio addressed the surrounding shinobi, "Stay here and keep a close watch on Sasori. If you encounter danger, don't hesitate to flee. I'll take a team to search for Raza and have him come to take charge." With that, Elder Chio led a squad of Sand Anbu out of the area. Despite searching Hidden Sand Village for over 10 minutes, they failed to find any trace of the 4th Kazekage. Chio's expression grew darker by the minute. She began to fear that Raza might soon meet the same fate as the 3rd Kazekage. Elder Chio couldn't help but worry that this might all be a ploy by Sasori, a diversion using Shukaku's rampage to draw their attention while others targeted the 4th Kazekage. If that were the case, what would become of Hidden Sand Village's future? The 4th Kazekage was the last shinobi truly qualified to hold the Kazekage title. Any successor, though nominally Kazekage, would struggle to halt the village's decline and might not even gain the approval of its Jonin. At that moment, a Sand Anbu by Chio's side spoke up, "Elder Chio, at this time of day, could it be that Kazekage-sama is at the mines? All of the village's finances come from him personally overseeing the mining operations." "The mines?" Chio paused, her expression turning a bit strange. She couldn't fathom the Kazekage's priorities. How could he remain at the mines when the village was dealing with a rampaging tailed beast? The Sand Anbu continued, "Elder Chio, if Kazekage-sama really is in the mines, he might not have heard anything from the village. After all, it's more than 20 kilometers away." Chio's expression softened somewhat, and she responded, "I see. Then lead the way. If it's for the sake of the village's finances, I have no reason to blame him." The Anbu nodded and began heading toward the mines, with Chio casting one last glance toward the distant mining area before following closely behind. Before long, the group arrived at the mines. Just as Elder Chio was preparing to descend into the mine with the others, they were met with an astonishing sight that made them all frown. At the mines, after inspecting the stockpile of ore, Orochimaru nodded in satisfaction and turned to the 4th Kazekage, saying, "Kazekage-sama, I hadn't expected the quality of your villages ore to be even better than I imagined." Across the entire ninja world, Ore of this caliber might only be surpassed by that of the Land of Iron. The magnet-style bloodline limit is truly enviable, isn't it? Seeing Orochimaru's interest in the ore, the fourth Kazekage smiled in response. We're just making an honest living, nothing compared to the sharp mind of someone like you, Orochimaru-sama. I've heard that many of the great merchants in the ninja world operate under your backing. At that moment, Orochimaru received a message from Byakuya, and a faint smile appeared on his lips. He extended his hand toward the fourth Kazekage and said, "Profit is profit, no need to call it a hardship. To show my sincerity, I'm willing to purchase your villages ore at 10% above market price. I hope this marks the start of a pleasant cooperation. An extra 10%? Then I look forward to a fruitful partnership." The fourth Kazekage quickly extended his hand in return. He knew Orochimaru's true intent was to secure Hidden Sand Village's support for future operations against Hidden Leaf Village. But Orochimaru's offer was too tempting to refuse. With his backing, the village would be able to train more ninja in the coming years. One day, they could join forces with Orochimaru to strike at Hidden Leaf Village and break free from its control. At that moment, Elder Chio and her group of sand shinobi arrived at the mine entrance. The sight of the fourth Kazekage and Orochimaru shaking hands caused Chio's expression to darken instantly. Chapter 315, Raza, the honest man. Before arriving at the mines, Elder Chio and the sand shinobi had imagined various scenarios of meeting the fourth Kazekage. Although Raza ruled the village with an iron hand, his dedication to the village was beyond question. Not only had he never used his position for personal gain, but he had even exploited his magnet style to mine resources and fill the financial gaps of Hidden Sand Village. A Kazekage of such integrity was a rarity in the ninja world. Thus, as long as Raza did nothing to overtly threaten the village, Elder Chio and the Jonin were willing to turn a blind eye to his autocratic ways. They had even tacitly allowed him to eliminate Yukara, a political rival. However, upon arriving at the mines, they were confronted with an unimaginable scene. In a time of crisis for the village, the Kazekage, Raza, was caught meeting in secret with a ninja from another village, Orochimaru, a former enemy of the sand, also known as the Cold Lord. In the last Ninja World War, Orochimaru led the forces that defeated Hidden Sand Village, forcing them into submission. Now, witnessing Raza chatting and laughing with Orochimaru made them question the events of that war. Could it be that Raza and Orochimaru had always been on such good terms? If their suspicions were correct, what had the war between Hidden Leaf Village and Hidden Sand Village really been about? Under the watchful eyes of the gathered sand shinobi, Raza's face turned visibly awkward. He quickly withdrew his hand from Orochimaru's grip, fixing him with a sharp glare as though attempting to deflect attention. Inwardly, Raza was perplexed. Wasn't this supposed to be a secret meeting with Orochimaru? How had Elder Chio found him here? Could there be a mole among his subordinates? If so, a thorough purge of the Anbu would be necessary once he returned. Orochimaru, glancing at Elder Chio and the others, smirked faintly. Kazekage-sama, it seems your control over your subordinates is lacking. If that's the case, I may have to reconsider our cooperation. Shut up. Raza's face darkened as he retorted. He was already debating whether to make a move against Orochimaru. Unlike other village leaders, Orochimaru was not only responsible for the deaths of many sand shinobi but also a rogue ninja from their ally, Hidden Leaf Village, a highly sensitive and dangerous individual. Orochimaru, sensing Raza's intent, silently stepped back. Having accomplished his goal, he had no intention of lingering and used his Great Snake Substitution Jutsu to retreat deeper into the mines. With Orochimaru gone, the awkwardness surrounding Raza only deepened. Forcing himself to remain composed, Raza approached Elder Chio and the others, asking, "Elder Chio, why have you suddenly come to the mines? Did something happen in the village?" Elder Chio fixed Raza with a piercing gaze and replied coldly, "If I hadn't come, I wouldn't have witnessed Kazekage-sama meeting with Orochimaru. Might I ask what important matters you were discussing?" Hearing the accusatory tone, Raza chose to explain honestly, "Orochimaru is a buyer for ore. I brought him here to inspect the quality. Beyond that, we discussed interfering in the war between Hidden Stones Village and Hidden Leaf Village. Look, while the Hidden Leaf Village is our ally, their restrictions on us are too severe. And so, we need to secure more favorable terms for the village and gradually free ourselves from their influence." Having spoken his mind, Raza looked at Elder Chio, hoping for understanding. After all, Chio had been instrumental in elevating him to the Kazekage position. She should comprehend his motives, as they were always for the benefit of Hidden Sand Village. Elder Chio listened intently before asking, "I believe your explanation. However, when did this cooperation with Orochimaru begin?" Failing to catch the underlying suspicion, Raza answered earnestly, "We've been in contact before, but this is our first official collaboration." Orochimaru's status as a rogue ninja makes it tricky if Hidden Leaf Village finds out. So, this isn't the first time. Elder Chio nodded thoughtfully while the surrounding sand shinobi began exchanging uneasy glances. Their perception of Raza had shifted dramatically. It turned out that while they had been fighting life and death battles on the front lines, their Kazekage had been secretly colluding with Orochimaru. No wonder the war between the Hidden Leaf Village and Hidden Sand Village had ended so abruptly. No wonder the village had been forced to sign those blatantly exploitative treaties. So, everything seemed to boil down to a deal between the fourth Kazekage and Orochimaru. But why did Raza agree to such terms? The answer was obvious: to secure his position as the fourth Kazekage and establish himself as the sole ruler of Hidden Sand Village. At that moment, the Sand Shinobi were reminded of the third Kazekage's disappearance and their earlier discussions about the puppet of the third Kazekage and Sasori of the Red Sand. Their expressions became increasingly complicated. They couldn't help but wonder why Sasori hadn't returned to Hidden Sand Village all these years. If Raza had attacked both Sasori and the third Kazekage back then, everything would start to make sense. Raza, being a master of magnet style, would have had the capability to assassinate the third Kazekage. After Raza had gravely injured the third Kazekage, leaving him on the brink of death, the third Kazekage might have encountered Sasori. Sasori, realizing that Raza was the true perpetrator, likely chose not to return to the village because he lacked the strength to confront him. Instead, Sasori bided his time in the ninja world, lying low for years. Now, having turned the third Kazekage into a puppet and possessing the strength to contend with Raza, Sasori might have finally decided to return, searching for an opportunity to topple Raza from the shadows. With these speculations, even without concrete evidence, the Sand Shinobi began to doubt the fourth Kazekage. After all, Raza himself had admitted to collaborating with Orochimaru, and their ears and eyes couldn't deceive them simultaneously. It was at this point that Raza finally sensed something was amiss. Frowning, he demanded, "What are those expressions on your faces? Do you suspect that I've been colluding with Orochimaru for a long time, betraying the interests of the village? Hey! I am the Kazekage of Hidden Sand Village. How could I possibly betray the village?" The Sand Shinobi exchanged glances, refraining from openly rebuking Raza but also making no effort to dispel their suspicions. Never before had Raza seen such expressions on his subordinates' faces, nor could he understand what had caused such a change. His face grew darker as he turned to Elder Chio, questioning sharply, "Elder Chio, what on earth has happened in the village for you to mobilize like this? Did the Hidden Leaf Village launch an attack during my absence?" "That's not the case." Elder Chio shook her head before continuing, "But just a moment ago, Gaara was attacked and went berserk in the village. The attacker's identity is quite unusual. It was Yoshimaru." The old veteran folded her arms before raising a brow. "According to Yoshimaru's testimony, the order to assassinate Gaara came from you. Raza, do you realize your actions nearly caused a Shukaku rampage in the village?" Chapter 316, The Fourth Kazekage's Betrayal. What was Yoshimaru doing, that useless fool? Failing to assassinate the Jinchuriki and causing him to go berserk was one thing, but how did he still have the audacity to remain alive in the ninja world? Didn't he always claim to love Gaara the most? Yet, he couldn't even handle such a simple task. After silently cursing Yoshimaru, the fourth Kazekage spoke sternly, "Yes, it was my order to assassinate Gaara. His growth has been too slow. I wanted to stimulate his development through this method so that he could quickly become a qualified Jinchuriki and serve the village." In the fourth Kazekage's view, his actions might have been extreme, but they were far from wrong. Yoshimaru was his direct subordinate, and Gaara was his son. He had absolute authority over both of them. Even if Gaara had been killed accidentally, it wouldn't have been a significant loss to the village. As for Gaara going berserk, that was even less of a problem. Today was an exception due to some delays. On any other day, if Gaara had gone out of control, he could have suppressed him at any time. However, after the fourth Kazekage explained his reasoning, the expressions of Chio and the others did not improve. They continued to stare at him with unwavering hostility in their eyes. The fourth Kazekage's cold-bloodedness terrified them. How could the fourth Kazekage so calmly issue such a cruel order, sending his wife's younger brother to assassinate his own son, simply because he was dissatisfied with his son's growth rate? To the shinobi of Hidden Sand Village, such actions made the fourth Kazekage seem more like a monster than Gaara, more like a heartless beast than Shukaku itself. If the fourth Kazekage could sacrifice his son and brother-in-law for the sake of the village now, who's to say he wouldn't one day sacrifice them as well, ordering them to kill those they held dear under the pretext of serving the village? Moreover, his cold-blooded behavior only made him a more plausible suspect for the murder of the third Kazekage. Sighing deeply, Elder Chio looked at the fourth Kazekage and spoke wearily, "So, Raza, You admit that you ordered Yoshimaru to assassinate the Jinchuriki? The fourth Kazekage nodded, seeing no reason to deny it. Elder Chio continued, then, do you also admit to secretly collaborating with Orochimaru and conspiring with him 10 years ago to harm the third Kazekage? The fourth Kazekage nodded initially but then realized something was amiss and quickly retorted, Elder Chio, I merely had trade agreements with Orochimaru. When did I ever conspire against the third Kazekage? Not to mention that the third Kazekage is merely missing, not confirmed dead. When he disappeared, I was in the village the whole time. Why would I even have a reason to harm him? Have you been misled by someone? Elder Chio shook her head. No one misled me. This is the suspicion of myself and other Jonin. As for whether the third Kazekage is missing or dead, you are the one who knows best. Elder Chio. This is slander. The fourth Kazekage roared furiously. Elder Chio gestured, and 2 Hidden Sand Village shinobi approached the fourth Kazekage. Raza, you should return to the village with me. Some matters need investigation before any conclusions can be drawn. However, as of now, you remain the primary suspect in the disappearance of the third Kazekage. I will return to the village, but I have no obligation to prove my innocence, nor will I take responsibility for these baseless accusations, the fourth Kazekage said coldly. Golden sand began to form around him as he glanced at Chio. You'd better explain everything clearly, or I will act in the name of the Kazekage. Elder Chio stared deeply at the fourth Kazekage before signaling for Jonin Baki to step forward and provide clarification. Fourth Kazekage-sama, 2 hours ago, the village was attacked by Shukaku. No one was able to stop it. At the critical moment, it was Seisaori who stepped forward and sealed Shukaku. Seisaori? The fourth Kazekage was momentarily stunned. Seisaori had been confirmed missing a long time ago. Moreover, Seisaori was a puppet master. How could he have the power to seal Shukaku? And how did this incident connect him to the third Kazekage? Seeing the Kazekage's confusion, Jonin Baki continued, fourth Kazekage-sama, Seisaori used the third Kazekage puppet to seal Shukaku. Upon hearing this, the fourth Kazekage became even more puzzled. If Seisaori possessed the Kazekage puppet, then Seisaori should logically be the prime suspect in the murder of the third Kazekage. Why, then, was suspicion directed at him instead? Taking a deep breath, the fourth Kazekage asked, where is Seisaori now? Have you not tried to capture him? The Kazekage puppet is in his possession, he must be the murderer. Jonin Baki avoided meeting the fourth Kazekage's eyes as he replied, fourth Kazekage-sama, we initially thought the same. However, Seisaori did not flee, nor did he show any intent to harm us. Additionally, he just saved the village. Thus, we believe Seisaori might not necessarily be the murderer. If he truly were the culprit, why would he risk suspicion by using the Kazekage puppet so openly? Baki paused for a moment before continuing, the Jinchuriki's rampage wasn't caused by Seisaori either, it was your doing. So now you suspect me to be the murderer? The fourth Kazekage was so enraged that even the gold dust around him began to tremble. He could barely control his chakra. Jonin Baki shook his head and said, we do not directly suspect you. We just think Seisaori isn't the killer. However, we overheard you conspiring with Orochimaru earlier, discussing deals that would harm the village's interests. You also admitted to privately collaborating with Orochimaru over the years. Thus, at this point, Baki raised his head, his gaze firm as he concluded, we suspect that you are the real murderer. After all, if the third Kazekage hadn't died back then, you wouldn't have become the fourth Kazekage. While you've provided funds for the village over the years, if not for the agreements you signed with Hidden Leaf Village, the village wouldn't have fallen into its current state. Faced with Baki's reasoning and the accusatory stares of the surrounding Hidden Sand Village shinobi, the fourth Kazekage found himself at a loss for words. How could he explain his innocence or that everything he had done was for the village? As the Hidden Sand Village shinobi closed in on him step by step, a nameless fury surged in the fourth Kazekage's heart. Reaching out into the air, he summoned a mass of gold dust into his grasp. Without hesitation, he attacked, sending countless shards of gold dust shooting at the surrounding shinobi like a storm of shrapnel. Elder Chio quickly summoned her puppets to shield the group, blocking the golden assault. Realizing that his attack had failed and understanding the consequences of further hostility, the fourth Kazekage regained his composure. Gritting his teeth, he formed a series of hand signs. Using the golden dust as cover, he disappeared from the mine and fled deeper into the desert. Chapter 317, Acting Kazekage. As the fourth Kazekage disappeared into the distance, becoming a mere black dot on the horizon, Elder Chio and the Hidden Sand Village shinobi stood frozen in place. They hadn't expected the fourth Kazekage to attack them, nor had they anticipated his refusal to return to the village with them. His decision to flee left everyone in shock. Given his position, even with suspicions about his involvement in the assassination of the third Kazekage, they had planned to escort him back to the village for supervision until concrete evidence was obtained. Only then would they address the allegations against Raza. However, his escape only deepened their doubts. If he were truly innocent, there was no reason to run. Returning to the village to confront Sasori and reveal the truth of the past would have sufficed. After exchanging uncertain glances, Baki turned to Elder Chio. Elder Chio, the fourth has fled. What should we do next? Elder Chio sighed. For now, let's return to the village. With our current manpower, we are no match for Raza and Orochimaru. We'll investigate further once we're back. Relieved by her decision, Baki and the others let out quiet breaths. They had no desire to fight Raza. Firstly, he was still the village's fourth Kazekage. Secondly, as the strongest shinobi in Hidden Sand Village, capturing him would have been nearly impossible, even with Elder Chio's support. Still, the events of the day left them uneasy. In just a few hours, the village had been rocked by a series of shocking events. The rampage of the Jinchuriki, the unexpected return of Sasori with the Kazekage puppet to suppress the chaos, the revelation that the fourth Kazekage had ordered the attack on the Jinchuriki to provoke Gaara's powers, and finally, the discovery of his secret dealings with Orochimaru. They couldn't predict what tomorrow would bring. Back in the village, Elder Chio approached the room where Sasori was staying. After being informed that Sasori hadn't left the room, she pushed the door open. Hearing the door creak, Sasori, manipulating Hiroko, turned to face her. Old hag, you're back so soon. Did Raza give you a clear explanation? Chio nodded. I misjudged you. The order to attack the Jinchuriki came from Raza, but it wasn't meant to kill him, only to provoke Gaara's abilities. How cold and unfeeling. Still, it suits Hidden Sand Village's traditions, Sasori said with a cold sneer. Then, his gaze sharpened with interest. Now that the Jinchuriki issue is settled, are you planning to deal with me, the rogue shinobi who left the village years ago? How many shinobis have Raza stationed outside? Is he counting on you to strike first, betting I won't harm my own grandmother? Sasori's probing caused Chio to fall silent. Had he not caught Raza and Orochimaru together at the mine, Sasori's suspicions might have come true. Hidden Sand Village would never have allowed Sasori to leave with the Kazekage puppet. But the situation had changed entirely. Under Baki's interrogation, Raza had attacked his fellow shinobi and fled. Whether his flight counted as desertion was another matter, but Hidden Sand Village now had no shinobi capable of matching Sasori's power. With such an imbalance, any interrogation was out of the question. In a way, Hidden Sand Village now needed Sasori's protection. After a moment of contemplation, Chio said, Sasori, perhaps I misunderstood you back then. Possessing the Kazekage puppet doesn't mean you were the one who attacked the Kazekage. You may also be a victim. Sasori froze briefly, silently marveling at how expertly Byakuya had manipulated the situation. In just a few hours, he had turned Sasori, with the Kazekage puppet in hand, from a suspect into a victim. Humphrey. At least you're not completely senile, old hag. However, I'm curious, who do you think is the real killer of the third Kazekage? The real culprit isn't confirmed yet. It could be Raza or even Orochimaru and the Hidden Leaf Village shinobi. After a pause, Chio added, before we search for the truth, I'd like to hear your story. Why did you leave the village back then? Why have you refused to return all these years? Sasori fell silent, unsure of how to answer. Byakuya hadn't provided him with a script before leaving, and he feared slipping up if he improvised. Seeing his reluctance, Chio sighed. She could guess at the events of the past and understood why Sasori had left the village. Raza's actions had not only led to the death of the third Kazekage but had also caused Sasori to lose faith in the village. Over the years, he had chosen to wander the shinobi world rather than return. Occasionally, he would sneak into the village at night, only to quietly observe the home he had long abandoned. If you don't wish to speak of the past, then don't, Chio said softly. After a moment, her tone grew somber. But I do have a favor to ask. I hope you'll agree out of respect for the care I gave you in the past. Sasori's expression turned wary. You want me to return the Kazekage puppet? Or stay in Hidden Sand Village? I won't agree to either, he said firmly. You stopped me from going to the battlefield years ago. Now you want to cage me here again? Chio shook her head. I don't need you to return the Kazekage puppet or stay in the village for long. But until the truth is revealed, the village needs your help. Without you, we can't stop the Jinchuriki's rampages. If other villages press us, we'll have no choice but to suffer. You don't want to see Hidden Sand Village fall to outsiders, do you? Sasori fell silent, neither refusing nor agreeing immediately. Sensing his hesitation, Chio quickly added, "While you're here, the village's shinobi will follow your orders. You'll have the authority of an acting Kazekage but won't have to deal with village affairs. If you want to leave, you may do so anytime." Hearing Chio offer him the role of acting Kazekage, Sasori realized their plan was nearing success. Still, Byakuya had instructed him to feign disinterest in the Kazekage position to avoid arousing suspicion. Fortunately, Sasori genuinely had no interest in the title and didn't need to act. He had agreed to this mission for a different reason entirely. Looking into Chio's eyes, Sasori said, "Old hag, I can agree to your terms, but I have one condition." Chio, visibly nervous, waited as Sasori paused briefly before continuing, "I want to visit my parents' graves." Chapter 318, Aftermath. The next morning, as the shinobi of Hidden Sand Village woke up and prepared to head to the Kazekage's office to receive their missions, they were greeted by an unexpected scene. The shinobi discovered that the fourth Kazekage, Raza, was not in the Kazekage's office. Instead, Chio and Debezo, two retired elders, were temporarily managing the village's affairs. Simultaneously, they noticed a fearsome and unfamiliar middle-aged man sitting in the Kazekage's office. The sight left the shinobi bewildered. They exchanged confused glances, unable to comprehend what had transpired. It wasn't that they suspected the elders had usurped power and installed a puppet leader. After all, Raza's victory over Pikura in the election for Kazekage was largely due to the support of Chio and Debezo. With their experience and contributions, either elder could have easily taken the position of Kazekage themselves. But why was there now a completely unfamiliar ninja in the Kazekage's office? Did something happen to the fourth Kazekage? Had he left, or worse, faced some accident? Soon, the shinobi received answers from their colleagues. The previous night, a series of dramatic events unfolded in the village. These included the rampage of the Jinchuriki, the return of Sasori, and the revelation of the fourth Kazekage's collusion with Orochimaru. In the end, after injuring Hidden Sand Village's Anbu, the fourth Kazekage chose to flee the village. The shocking news spread rapidly throughout the village, with shinobi eagerly gossiping under the pretense of secrecy. "I'll tell you this, but don't tell anyone else." Before long, the entire Hidden Sand Village knew of the fourth Kazekage's departure. Even Raza, who was observing the village through his third eye, heard the rampant rumors. Furious, he crushed the sand-crafted eye in his hand. Where did these absurd rumors came from? He thought to himself. When did he ever attempt to harm the Jinchuriki? How could he have colluded with Orochimaru to kill the third Kazekage? Sasori's use of the puppetized Kazekage couldn't possibly implicate him. This was clearly Sasori's conspiracy. In hindsight, when he first heard rumors in the shinobi underworld about a mysterious puppet master, he should have issued bounties targeting puppet masters associated with Hidden Sand Village to capture any suspected rogue ninja. Calming himself, Raza began strategizing his return to Hidden Sand Village and expelling Sasori from the village. First, he couldn't openly re-enter Hidden Sand Village. The accusations of his collaboration with Orochimaru and the attack on Chio and others were undeniable. Reflecting on the events, he still didn't understand why he lost his composure and attacked Baki and the others. Second, he needed to find evidence proving Sasori's role in assassinating the third Kazekage. Only with solid proof could he reclaim his authority as Kazekage and pursue Sasori of the Red Sand. As Raza pondered his next steps, a desert viper slithered toward him. Noticing the snake, Raza hurled a rock at it. The snake was enveloped in a cloud of white smoke, transforming into Orochimaru. Raza's expression darkened upon recognizing Orochimaru. Orochimaru approached him with a sly smile. "Kazekage Dono, I've heard about what transpired yesterday. Sasori of the Red Sand infiltrated Hidden Sand Village in your absence and carried out a series of vicious schemes. Not only did he frame us for the death of the third Kazekage, but he also managed to secure a position as acting Kazekage." Raza's face remained cold as he sneered. "Do you think Sasori could have managed all that on his own? Your involvement was pivotal in this mess. If not for your meddling, I wouldn't be in this precarious situation. You suspect me of collaborating with Sasori to frame you?" Orochimaru feigned innocence before continuing. "If that were the case, why didn't I team up with Sasori last night to eliminate you? Do you genuinely believe that Sasori and I, together, wouldn't have the strength to kill you?" Raza fell silent. Orochimaru wasn't wrong, he wasn't a match for both Orochimaru and Sasori combined. However, if the two hadn't planned together, why did Orochimaru and Sasori appear near Hidden Sand Village at the same time, and why did Sasori choose to act precisely when Raza left the village? The coincidence was too striking. Raza frowned and asked, "Even if I were to believe your explanation, what are you doing here now?" With a cold snort, he continued, I am no longer the Kazekage. The ore you procured can no longer be delivered as promised. Our cooperation has ended. Orochimaru shook his head and replied cryptically, Kazekage Dono, I believe our partnership hasn't ended. In fact, it's only just beginning. Raza's gaze flickered, focusing intently on Orochimaru. Orochimaru continued, Sasori is just an ordinary puppet master. He has no experience managing a shinobi village. Even if he becomes Kazekage, he won't be able to secure the funds necessary to keep Hidden Sand Village running. The statement gave Raza pause, and he nodded before realizing something was amiss. He quickly countered, Orochimaru, the Kazekage puppet is in Sasori's possession. He has the same ability to extract ore as I do. I cannot agree with your assessment. Orochimaru sighed softly, gazing at Raza with a look of pity. Raza was momentarily taken aback before hearing a voice behind him. Raza, why can't you just be a bit more naive and let yourself be deceived? I've already given you plenty of leeway. If it weren't for the rarity of your magnet-style ability, I wouldn't have spared your life. Do you really think you've survived thus far on your own merits? Startled, Raza turned around. On a nearby rock stood a young man, one hand resting on his hip while holding a black rod in the other. He looked down at Raza lazily. Who are you? Raza demanded, his expression tense. He then turned to Orochimaru. Orochimaru, who is this man? Is he one of your subordinates? Orochimaru didn't respond to Raza. Instead, he bowed respectfully to the young man and said, Byakuya-sama, I've done as you instructed and tried to persuade Raza. Unfortunately, he's too foolish to see his future. Byakuya-sama. Raza's mind raced. A ninja whom even Orochimaru would address as Sama, Lord? Not even the third Hokage of Hidden Lee Village could command such deference. Who was this person, and why was he targeting both Raza and Hidden Sand Village? If Orochimaru served this man, did that mean Sasori was also his subordinate? The name Byakuya struck a chord in Raza's memory. Wasn't that the name of the head of the Hidden Rain Village Anbu? Byakuya glanced at Raza without wasting any words. He attacked immediately. In an instant, Byakuya appeared behind Raza and unleashed a wood-style jutsu. A forest surged from the desert sands, engulfing the fourth Kazekage completely. Chapter 321, Leaving the Future of Hidden Sand Village to You. Facing the overwhelming wood-style, deep forest emergence, the fourth Kazekage, Raza, attempted to resist. He believed that even against Byakuya and Orochimaru, he had a fighting chance due to his magnet-style bloodline limit. Magnet-style was an exceptionally versatile and powerful ability, granting control over gold dust and enabling flight. Historically, every Sand Shinobi who mastered magnet-style had risen to the position of Kazekage. What Raza didn't realize was that Byakuya not only understood magnet-style's strengths and limitations but also possessed abilities of the same type. Only far more potent. Under Byakuya's crushing power, Raza barely lasted 3 minutes before being defeated. Initially, Raza tried to counter the trees with his gold dust, attempting to destroy the spreading forest. However, the growth rate of the forest vastly outpaced his ability to destroy it. Sensing danger, Raza chose to leverage his flight capabilities to escape. But when he ascended several hundred meters, he found Byakuya already waiting above him. Attempting to burrow underground using Earth Style also failed, as Byakuya's wood clones were hidden below. After multiple failed escape attempts, Raza resolved to make one final stand, only to be swiftly overpowered. Exhausted and nearly out of chakra, his body was pierced by several black rods, leaving him collapsed in the sands. Struggling to lift his head, Raza glared at Orochimaru and Byakuya. Finally, he understood why a proud ninja like Orochimaru had submitted to Byakuya's authority. The answer was simple: Byakuya possessed strength far surpassing the 5 Kage. In Byakuya's presence, Raza felt as though he were a newly minted Jonin facing a legendary Kage. What he couldn't comprehend was why such a powerful figure would bother to conspire against him. Noticing Raza's confusion, Byakuya casually sat on a nearby rock and spoke with indifference. Kazekage-sama, you must be wondering why I didn't directly attack Hidden Sand Village and instead orchestrated events to turn you into a missing ninja while placing Sasori in power. The reason is simple. I want Hidden Sand Village intact, not as a war-torn ruin. Hearing this, Raza widened his eyes. By removing you from the position of Kazekage, Sasori, as the grandson of Elder Tio, naturally becomes the most suitable candidate. This allows us to easily control Hidden Sand Village. Byakuya paused, a faint smile forming on his lips. In fact, I should thank you. If it weren't for your order for Yashimaru to target Gaara, Sasori wouldn't have so easily gained the trust of the Sand Ninja. Our encounter would have been delayed considerably. Hearing this, Raza's eyes widened in rage, and he growled through clenched teeth. Ha! Sasori is indeed your subordinate. And the death of the third Kazekage. Was that also your doing, in collusion with Orochimaru? Byakuya shook his head. The third Kazekage's death had nothing to do with me. Nor do I have any interest in him. When I first met Sasori, he already possessed the Kazekage puppet. So, our relationship is more of a transaction. I help him become Kazekage, and he swears loyalty to me. Learning that Byakuya's sole objective was to control Hidden Sand Village, Raza's expression softened slightly. Yet, he couldn't understand Byakuya's motivations and asked. I have one question. Why do you want to control Hidden Sand Village? There's no benefit for you. The Land of Wind's territory is even more barren than the Land of Rain. Orochimaru also looked at Byakuya with interest. While Orochimaru knew Byakuya's ultimate goal was Hidden Sand Village's tailed beast, he was curious how Byakuya would answer without revealing the organization's true intentions. Byakuya chuckled and replied. Why does one need a reason to control Hidden Sand Village? Just as you desired to become Kazekage, who wouldn't want to become the ruler of the ninja world? The ruler of the ninja world. Both Raza and Orochimaru twitched at the audacity of the statement. It seemed like something only a naive person would say. Yet, given Byakuya's power, his ambition didn't seem entirely implausible. One day, he might truly unite the entire ninja world under his control. Byakuya's expression betrayed a hint of embarrassment. However, no matter how awkward it felt, he couldn't exactly reveal the truth. That he had a system guiding him. Compared to the deranged dreams of those Uchiha lunatics, Byakuya mused, his ambitions were far more grounded. At least he didn't aspire to put the entire world into an infinite slumber. After pondering for a moment, the fourth Kazekage, Raza, asked. Byakuya, now that Hidden Sand Village is under your control, what do you plan to do with it? Surely, you won't just leave it to its own devices? Of course not. Byakuya responded. Hidden Sand Village's current economic structure is extremely fragile and overly dependent. Aside from the daimyo's funding and the sale of minerals, it has almost no other sources of income. Heck, even the most basic mission commissions for its shinobi are significantly fewer than those of other villages. If this model continues unchecked, Hidden Sand Village is doomed to collapse economically, even without external invasions. Byakuya, as a transmigrator, knew that deserts like the Land of Wind had nothing to offer but one special commodity, oil. Without it, such places are hard to rise. To avoid self-destruction, Hidden Sand Village has historically been the first to initiate wars. However, due to its weaker overall strength, it often ends up defeated by the other four great villages. Raza listened intently to Byakuya's analysis and nodded in agreement. He then asked. So, how would you solve Hidden Sand Village's economic problems and prevent its collapse? That's a complex issue. Byakuya admitted, his expression turning slightly amused. He looked at Raza and said. Why would I bother answering that question? These matters are for Sasori to handle in the future. What does it have to do with you? Raza suddenly realized his error. He was no longer the esteemed Kazekage but a captive. Yet, whenever topics about Hidden Sand Village arose, he couldn't help but think from the perspective of its leader, albeit often selfishly. Raza's deeply egocentric nature, his mistrust of others, and his unwillingness to explain himself to anyone defined his character. These traits had not only caused Gaara's tragic childhood but also led to his own assassination by Orochimaru just before the Hidden Leaf Village crush plan. Sighing heavily, Raza seemed to make a decision. He turned to Byakuya and Orochimaru and said. Since you genuinely intend to govern Hidden Sand Village properly, as evidenced by your understanding of its flaws, I can leave this world without regret. You can proceed now and send this Kazekage on his way. Hearing this, Byakuya frowned in confusion and said. Raza, when did I ever say I wanted to kill you? Do you think I went to all the trouble of framing you, demoting you from Kazekage to a missing ninja, just to take your life? Chapter 322, Raza's Awakening. Did I really go to all the trouble of framing you, turning you from Kazekage into a missing ninja, just to kill you? Raza froze, staring at Byakuya with confusion. If not to kill me, then what was all this scheming for? He thought, struggling to comprehend. The awkward silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Finally, Raza broke it. In the ninja world, only the dead can keep secrets. You told me so many secrets just now. Isn't that a prelude to killing me? Byakuya shook his head and raised two fingers. First, I have no intention of killing you. While you're not as strong as I am, you're still one of the rare powerhouses in the ninja world. You're useful to me. Second, in my view, even the dead cannot keep secrets. Not in this world. The emotional roller coaster left Raza speechless. He slumped slightly, resigned. Then what do you want from me? Are you trying to recruit me? Do you think I'd agree to something like that? Byakuya pointed to Raza's chest. I think the seal on your heart is persuasive enough. Besides, as Kazekage, don't you want to see the future development of Hidden Sand Village? Raza instinctively touched his chest, sensing an unfamiliar presence inside his body. Byakuya's words struck a chord. As Kazekage, Raza could disregard his children and subordinates, even his own life. But not Hidden Sand Village. The night his wife Karura died during childbirth, Raza resolved to dedicate his life to the village. After a deep breath, Raza finally said, "You've convinced me. Until I see Hidden Sand Village break free from its curse, I won't let myself die disgracefully in the desert." System prompt, Raza has joined the Akatsuki. You have obtained the magnet-style bloodline limit, Byakuya smiled approvingly. That's the Kazekage I admire. Willing to endure humiliation for the sake of the village. One day, you'll rise again. Endure humiliation. Orochimaru couldn't help smirking. He had heard Byakuya use this historical idiom before. The man in the story had ultimately destroyed the nation that humiliated him. Byakuya's expression turned serious as he addressed Raza. Do you remember the plan Orochimaru mentioned to you last night? Your first task is to attack the Wind Daimyo. I'll notify Hidden Sand Village to protect him, which will allow them to control him in the name of safeguarding his life. Attack the Wind Daimyo? Raza narrowed his eyes. Carrying out such a task would permanently cement his status as a missing ninja. Meanwhile, Sasori, who would save the daimyo, would gain his support and solidify his position as Kazekage. After considering the implications, Raza realized the task was a test of his loyalty. If he couldn't sever ties with Hidden Sand Village and the Land of Wind completely, Byakuya would never fully trust him. After a moment's thought, Raza agreed to the task. He had no other options. Several hours later, Byakuya, Orochimaru, and Raza arrived at the Wind capital. Staring at the daimyo's mansion, Raza took a deep breath and dove toward it, prepared to sever ties with his past. Within minutes, Raza subdued the daimyo's guards and took the Wind daimyo captive. 1 month later in the Kazekage's modified office, Sasori was quietly crafting puppets. Although officially the acting Kazekage, he resembled a reclusive puppet master uninterested in worldly affairs. Despite this, the surrounding sand shinobi gazed at Sasori with awe and respect. The reasons were clear. Over the past month, Sasori had prevented a rampage by the Jinchuriki. Rescued the Wind daimyo from the clutches of the former Kazekage. Shared advanced puppet techniques, including both combat and civilian applications. Sasori's contributions earned him widespread admiration, solidifying his place as a leader, even if he rarely handled official duties. After accomplishing these tasks, Sasori earned the trust and recognition of Hidden Sand Village as shinobi, solidifying his position as the acting Kazekage. Having finished crafting his puppet, Sasori left the Kazekage's office, entrusting the paperwork to Elder Chio. He then headed toward Raza's residence. Chio, upon arriving at the office, sighed in resignation but took over the duties anyway. Though she felt somewhat disgruntled about having to work post-retirement, she couldn't bring herself to refuse her grandson. If she didn't handle these tedious affairs, there was always the risk that Sasori might leave one day. Not long after, Sasori arrived at Raza's residence. Despite Raza being labeled a rogue after abducting the Wind daimyo, his children were not ostracized as a result. Sasori's visit served two purposes, to check on Gaara and to reassure Temari and Kankuro. Both Byakuya and Elder Chio had suggested that calming Raza's children would improve relations with Raza's former loyalists, thereby reducing internal strife in Hidden Sand Village. Upon Sasori's arrival, Temari and Kankuro immediately came out to greet him, looking nervous and uncertain. Over the past few days, they had learned the full extent of Raza's actions. Although Elder Chio assured them that their father's deeds did not implicate them, they still felt uneasy facing Sasori. In contrast, Gaara seemed more comfortable around Sasori. Gaara knew Sasori had once stopped one of his rampages and could sense the solitude within Sasori's heart. A feeling he deeply understood. Without needing words, they instinctively empathized with each other. Inside Raza's residence, Sasori turned to Gaara and asked, "Gaara, has Shukaku been bothering you at night recently? If it keeps disturbing your sleep, I'll take care of it." Aware of Gaara's difficulties with maintaining rest due to Shukaku's interference, Sasori had previously sought Byakuya's help. Thanks to Byakuya's sealing techniques, Shukaku's influence on Gaara had been minimized, allowing him to sleep soundly. Gaara shook his head and replied, "Shukaku only makes noise during the day now. I've been able to sleep well." Hearing this, Sasori nodded in satisfaction before shifting his gaze to the puppets in the corner of the courtyard. "Who made these puppets?" Kankuro hesitantly stepped forward. "I did." Sasori's expression grew serious as he evaluated the puppets. "Your work is decent, but I suggest you review the notes I left in the library. Focus on improving your puppet-making skills." I'll personally test you in the future. Konkuro's face lit up with excitement. Yes, Sasori-sama. To Konkuro, Sasori wasn't just the acting Kazekage. He was a genius puppeteer whose mastery of the art far surpassed his own. The opportunity to receive Sasori's guidance meant his skills would improve significantly. After addressing Konkuro, Sasori turned to Temari. Temari, take good care of your two brothers. While I'm not skilled in wind style, I can arrange for you to learn from someone who is. Temari nodded, feeling a mix of relief and gratitude. Sasori's willingness to look out for them eased much of the tension she had been feeling. Chapter 323, A Change in Mindset. Sasori wasn't lying. He did know a ninja skilled in wind style. That person was none other than his colleague in the Akatsuki, Kakazu. While Kakazu's proficiency in wind style wasn't on par with the Kazekage, he was at least at the level of an elite Joe ninja, more than capable of instructing a young girl Temari. More importantly, Kakazu was a ninja who worked for money. As long as the price was right, Kakazu would do anything. Except for assassinating the first Hokage. Also, Sasori didn't dislike such a person. Temari nodded slightly, silently accepting Sasori's decision. However, she kept her distance from him, believing that his approach toward her and her two younger brothers was merely an attempt to win favor, to present himself as a benevolent figure to the Sand Ninja. To Temari, this was neither entirely good nor entirely bad. After all, even when their father, the fourth Kazekage, was still in Hidden Sand Village, they never received warmth from him. Now, they had gained another guardian. Just as Temari had this thought, Sasori approached Gaara, extended his hand, and said, I've finally delivered the old woman's message. So, do you have some time now? Let's find a quiet place outside. The village is still too noisy. Gaara grasped Sasori's hand and nodded in response. Watching the two of them leave, Temari furrowed her brows and glanced at Konkuro beside her. The siblings exchanged a helpless smile. Konkuro, don't you think the acting Kazekage is strange? He doesn't seem like a Kazekage at all. You're right, sis. I feel like he and Gaara are the same type of person. Kids who were never accepted. How did our village end up with such a troubling acting Kazekage? Several hundred meters away, Byakuya and the fourth Kazekage stood atop a tower, witnessing everything. When the fourth Kazekage, Raza, saw Sasori taking Gaara out to play, he also noticed a genuine smile on Gaara's face. That smile made his own expression grow extremely solemn. For the first time, he began to question himself as a father. He always thought what he did as a father was all for the village and his family. Surely, his children should understand, but why did Gaara look so happy? Had he failed as a father? If Byakuya knew what the fourth Kazekage was thinking, he would have laughed out loud. If Raza was considered a competent father, then the shinobi world had no unqualified fathers. After all, ordering an uncle to assassinate his own son wasn't something an average person could even imagine. After a brief silence, the fourth Kazekage turned to Byakuya and asked, Byakuya, did you bring me here just to show me Temari, Konkuro, and Gaara? Just to prove that they can live better without me? If you want to see it that way, I can't stop you. Byakuya raised a brow to which Raza sighed. I truly am not a good father. The fourth Kazekage crossed his arms and continued. But I consider myself a competent Kazekage. If I had to choose between the village and my family, I would choose the village. Byakuya gave him a pitying look and said. I don't want to break it to you, but you're neither a good father nor a good Kazekage. The fourth Kazekage's expression darkened. How am I not a good Kazekage? Do you have any idea how difficult it is to lead Hidden Sand Village? If I hadn't exhausted myself mining for resources, the village's finances would have collapsed long ago. Raza began to explain how hard it was to manage a village devoid of any plant life but sand and wind. The Land of Wind daimyo's military funding is limited. The Kazekage, Sasori, you're supporting will eventually have to rely on my methods to solve Hidden Sand Village's financial crisis. Byakuya shook his head. I'm not denying your contributions to the village, but your entire approach has been flawed from the start. No matter how much effort you put into the wrong path, you'll only get the wrong results. The fourth Kazekage stared at Byakuya, signaling him to continue. Byakuya took a sip of water and explained. The financial crisis of Hidden Sand Village is due to a combination of geographical disadvantages and war losses. Solving it requires the collective effort of the entire village, not just reliance on a single powerful ninja. In the years after the Third Great Ninja War, you temporarily stabilized the situation through mining, but the moment something happens to you, the village will face an even greater crisis and become completely dependent on Hidden Leaf Village. Hearing this, the fourth Kazekage unexpectedly replied. You're not wrong. Hidden Sand Village has already become the vassal of another power. Not Hidden Leaf Village, but the Akatsuki. Byakuya remained unfazed. If you truly want to resolve the crisis, there are only two solutions: developing chakra technology or utilizing the natural resources within the Land of Wind. Hidden Sand Village has already fallen behind in biological research. If it wants to catch up, the only way is through puppet technology. Creating various puppets to compensate for the village's population shortage. This is why you let Saisari replace me? The fourth Kazekage began to seriously contemplate. That's part of the reason. Byakuya glanced at him and continued. Apart from puppet technology, Hidden Sand Village can also rely on the natural resources of the Land of Wind. Before arriving here, I deliberately investigated the underground regions of the Land of Wind's desert and discovered a vast reserve of oil and gas. With these resources, Hidden Sand Village won't have to worry about finances for decades to come. Oil and gas? What's that? The fourth Kazekage didn't understand. Byakuya sighed and explained. It's an alternative energy source to chakra. While it hasn't been widely used yet, many within the 5 great nations have already begun utilizing it. Hearing this, the fourth Kazekage began to grasp the significance of oil. With Byakuya's explanations, he realized he no longer needed to worry about Hidden Sand Village's future. As long as they had puppet technology and oil, the village's future would be bright. However, what unsettled him was that the one leading Hidden Sand Village to prosperity wasn't him. It was the Saisari of the Red Sand. Under Byakuya's guidance, the Raza reluctantly left Hidden Sand Village and met up with Orochimaru outside the village. Seeing the dejected fourth Kazekage, Orochimaru couldn't stop smiling. He had been framed and exiled from Hidden Leaf Village, but Raza, the fourth Kazekage, had actually been forced into becoming a rogue ninja. The ninja world was becoming more and more amusing. After calming himself, the Raza asked, Byakuya, what should I do next? Byakuya rested his chin on his hand, pondered for a while, and said, You're a rogue ninja now, and rogue ninjas have their own way of survival. Stay with Orochimaru in Land of Rice for now. He has a few mines there if I recall correctly. How did he end up a rogue ninja, only to go back to mining? The fourth Kazekage was speechless. Sensing his frustration, Byakuya continued. Mining is just to train your magnet style. Once the time is right, I'll have you and Orochimaru make a move against Hidden Leaf Village, freeing Hidden Sand Village from its shackles once and for all. Hearing this, the fourth Kazekage's eyes lit up. If he was doing hard labor, he would question his life choices. But if it was for the sake of the village, that changed everything. If he couldn't be the Kazekage in the light, he would become the Kazekage in the shadows. At least, as a rogue ninja, he could finally attack Hidden Leaf Village without restraint. From his perspective, maybe being a rogue ninja wasn't so bad after all. Chapter 324, I want to live under the sun. While the fourth Kazekage was coming to terms with his status as a rogue ninja, the third Hokage, one of the 5 Kage, was in the Hokage office, overwhelmed by the ongoing war on the front lines. The war between Hidden Stones Village and Hidden Leaf Village had been going on for 3 months. During this period, there had been no large-scale direct confrontation, but small team skirmishes had never ceased. The casualties continued to rise daily. And so, the third Hokage desperately wanted to change the current deadlock, but there was nothing he could do. He attempted to summon elite jonin from the major clans to the battlefield, but they always found various excuses to decline, forcing him to rely on Anbu forces, further depleting his already limited manpower. The root of the issue was the lack of trust between the clans and the Hokage's administration. After the Uchiha incident, the relationship between the Hokage's administration and the major clans had grown strained for a very simple reason. The Senju and Uchiha, the 2 great clans that founded Hidden Leaf Village, had all but disappeared from the village. The Senju clan was absorbed into the village after suffering heavy losses in the First and Second Shinobi World Wars. Meanwhile, the Uchiha clan was wiped out by Itachi Uchiha, vanishing from the ninja world altogether. The remaining clans had taken note of these events and were wary. They didn't want to become the second Senju or the second Uchiha. Therefore, they refused to send too many jonin to the battlefield. Even going so far as to avoid earning too much merit in the war. The third Hokage had no choice but to accept this attitude. Unless he wanted to make enemies of all the major clans, he couldn't force them to act. With a sigh, he turned his attention to the 2 intelligence scrolls that had just been delivered. The first scroll came from Hidden Sand Village and contained explosive information. It reported that the fourth Kazekage had attempted to assassinate a Jinchuriki, conspired with the S-rank rogue ninja Orochimaru, and ultimately defected. The third Hokage was stunned. Each piece of information from Hidden Sand Village was more shocking than the last. Why would the Kazekage attempt to assassinate a Jinchuriki? Wasn't the One-Tails Jinchuriki his youngest son? As for working with Orochimaru, that wasn't particularly surprising. Orochimaru was a rogue ninja from Hidden Leaf Village, not Hidden Sand Village, so it wasn't a big deal for the Sand Village. Even though the two villages were allies, alliances were often just words. Few truly took them seriously. Could it be that Hidden Sand Village had finally decided to accept becoming a vassal of Hidden Leaf Village? The third Hokage doubted that possibility. The most shocking part of the intelligence wasn't even the assassination attempt or the connection to Orochimaru. It was the fact that the fourth Kazekage had attacked the Wind Daimyo and then defected. The idea of a Kage defecting was unimaginable. It sounded like a pure joke. However, after reading the entire report, the third Hokage began to understand. The reason for the Kazekage's defection wasn't just the assassination attempt or his dealings with Orochimaru. It was his suspected involvement in the murder of the third Kazekage. Logically speaking, if rumors spread that he had assassinated his predecessor, his position as Kazekage would be unsustainable. If the same situation had happened in Hidden Leaf Village. If he were accused of killing his teacher, Tobirama Senju, he wouldn't be able to remain Hokage either. Pulling his thoughts back together, the third Hokage began considering his next moves regarding diplomacy with Hidden Sand Village. With the fourth Kazekage gone, Hidden Sand Village would soon appoint an acting Kazekage. It could be an elite Jonin, or perhaps his old acquaintance, Chio. If it was Chio, negotiations would be easier. If it was a new Jonin leader, he would have to analyze their stance carefully. Setting aside the first scroll, the third Hokage picked up the second one, which bore the seal of a toad. Intelligence from Jiraiya at the front lines. A brief glance at its contents brought a wry smile to his face. Jiraiya had sent good news. In a time of crisis, Tsunade had appeared at the Hidden Leaf Village military camp, offering her services as a volunteer medical ninja. With two of the three Sanins present, the front lines had stabilized. It wouldn't be long before Hidden Stone's village sought peace talks. In a deadlock like this, the war couldn't continue unless Hidden Stone's village was willing to suffer mutual destruction. But that shorty old bag Onoki wasn't that reckless. However, according to Jiraiya, Tsunade still refused to return to the village. She didn't want to see him, nor did she want to set foot in a Hidden Leaf Village that was no longer the same as before. After writing his reply, the third Hokage's expression changed slightly, as if he had just remembered something. He then ordered an Anbu agent to summon Denzo. 3 months ago, he had personally ordered the dissolution of Root, using it as a scapegoat for the Uchiha massacre to appease the major clans. But now, he wanted to restart it. To end the war with Hidden Stone's village quickly, Tsunade and Jiraiya alone weren't enough. He also needed Denzo and Root. Half an hour later, the Anbu agent returned to the office with an uneasy expression. Hokage-sama, Denzo-sama refuses to come to the Hokage office. He also said that Root has been disbanded and that he has retired. Denzo refuses to come? And he claims Root has been disbanded? The Heizeran was skeptical. Denzo had always coveted the Hokage position. There was no way he had really disbanded Root, even if he had been ordered to. Noticing the Hokage's doubts, the Anbu agent added. Hokage-sama, Denzo-sama also asked me to tell you that he no longer seeks the Hokage position and doesn't want to remain in the shadows anymore. He said that, in the time he has left, he just wants to enjoy living under the sun. The third Hokage's expression darkened. He didn't believe Denzo would truly give up on becoming Hokage. This was probably a negotiation tactic. He was holding out for better terms. But Root already controlled much of the village's power. If he gave Denzo even more authority, Root's leader would become the true shadow ruler of Hidden Leaf Village. After a long pause, the third Hokage coldly replied. Tell Denzo that he has done well, that he has faithfully carried out my orders. Since that is the case, he no longer needs to serve as the leader of Root. From today onward, he can retire and enjoy his old age. Understood, Hokage-sama. With that, the Anbu agent departed from the Hokage office. Once he was gone, the third Hokage's face turned grim. Denzo would find someone else if he no longer wanted to be his enforcer. There were plenty of subordinates eager for power. Even without Denzo, he would find a suitable replacement. Someone who could do the job just as well, if not better. His son, Shinosuke Sarutobi, and Kakashi were both strong candidates. Chapter 325, the third Hokage and Shizue Shinosuke Sarutobi was his son and the current head of Hidden Leaf Village's Anbu, possessing the strength of an elite Jonin. If he continued to hone his skills for several more decades, it wouldn't be impossible for him to reach the Kage level. All along, the third Hokage had considered grooming Shinosuke to compete for the position of the next or even the one after the next Hokage. Unfortunately, whether in terms of strength or accomplishments, Shinosuke was not qualified to compete for the Hokage title. Serving as the Anbu commander was already the peak of his potential. If he were to replace Denzo, would the war at the front lines become easier to handle? The third Hokage fell into deep thought but soon shook his head and abandoned the idea. First, Shinosuke's strength wasn't enough to lead teams on missions behind enemy lines. Second, he lacked the necessary darkness in his heart. He wouldn't be as decisive as Denzo in dealing with certain matters. Most importantly, once someone took the position of Root's leader, their career would essentially be over. Having dismissed the idea of replacing Denzo with Shinosuke, the third Hokage also abandoned the thought of using Kakashi as a substitute. He didn't care about Kakashi's future, but Kakashi simply wasn't qualified to replace Denzo. Compared to Shinosuke, Kakashi lacked both experience and significant achievements. Moreover, his raw strength was even weaker. After careful consideration, the third Hokage let out a soft sigh. There was no second Denzo in Hidden Leaf Village. He couldn't do it without the old Denzo. Some things could only be done by Denzo. Only Denzo could execute some missions on his behalf. The only question was, what harsh conditions would Denzo demand this time? Half an hour later, the third Hokage arrived at the Root headquarters. As he stepped inside, he narrowed his eyes at the completely renovated base. He recalled issuing an order to reform the Root organization, having voiced concerns in meetings about Root being too dark and straying from the will of fire. But when had Denzo ever listened to him? And yet, Denzo had actually gone ahead and revamped Root. Was this renovation not too drastic, though? This place no longer resembled Root. It looked more like an academy filled with the will of fire. Denzo always had his own agenda. If he had gone to such lengths to change Root, there had to be a deeper reason. Was it possible that Denzo truly wanted to cleanse his reputation and step into the light? After some internal speculation, the Hiruzen continued walking toward the depths of the base, soon finding Denzo seated at his desk, engrossed in reading. The book in Denzo's hands was not some inappropriate material but rather a notebook written by Tobirama Senju. Seeing this, the third Hokage felt even more uneasy. Upon hearing footsteps, Shisui, posing as Denzo, lifted his head, narrowed his eyes slightly, and said, "Hiruzen, what brings you to visit an idle man like me?" Hiruzen casually found a seat and, while observing Shisui, remarked, "Since when did you take such an interest in these writings, Denzo? You're actually studying the works of Tobirama-sensei?" "Of course, I'm studying Tobirama-sensei's philosophy," Shisui replied nonchalantly. "In the past, I was too busy managing Root and never had personal time. Now that I've stepped away, revisiting my old interests is only natural." Saying this, Shisui passed Tobirama's notebook to the third Hokage and added, "Hiruzen, you should read Tobirama-sensei's notes more often as well. You'll gain different insights at different times." When Shisui first took over Denzo's identity, he was extremely cautious, fearing any misstep might expose him. However, as time passed, he became more comfortable in the role, even developing his own interpretation of Denzo's character, adding a new dimension to it. His first command after assuming the role was to change Root's entire aesthetic. A decision that had earned him Byakuya-sama's praise. Moreover, Byakuya-sama had once told him about Denzo's defining traits. He desperately desired to become Hokage and frequently used Tobirama's ideologies to pressure the third Hokage. Since then, Shisui has delved into Tobirama's works and even come to accept some of his viewpoints, such as the idea that the Uchiha are inherently dangerous. But if the Uchiha are all villains, could it not also be said that those from the Senju lineage were all hypocrites? Villains and hypocrites had established this village out of necessity. Sooner or later, internal conflicts over interests would lead to its decline. The third Hokage, however, ignored the notebook, his expression turning serious. "Now isn't the time for this. Why did you refuse my orders to lead Root in battle at the front lines?" Shisui retrieved the notebook and replied casually. "Root has already been disbanded. I can't head to the front lines alone and have no one under my command. It's not that I refuse the order. I don't have the means to comply." The third Hokage gave him a pointed look. "Do you really expect me to believe that Root has been disbanded? When has Root ever truly been dissolved? You've merely sent your people on temporary missions, ready to recall them at any moment." Shisui shook his head. "That was the past. Now is different. With the Uchiha issue resolved, Root has lost its purpose. Naturally, I saw no reason to keep it operational. And besides, after the Uchiha incident, Root can no longer remain in the open. If we continue to operate, it will only make the major clans in Hidden Leaf Village more wary. Wasn't your decision to disband Root originally meant to alleviate their concerns? So, why are you questioning me now?" The third Hokage furrowed his brows. "The front lines need Root. Without Root conducting sabotage operations behind enemy lines, our war with Hidden Stone's village will cost us many more lives." Still flipping through the notebook, Shisui replied. "Sabotage missions don't align with the will of fire. Between short-term gains and the village's long-term philosophy, I believe preserving the will of fire is more important. Hearing this, Hyzerin was visibly shaken. Something felt off. Denzo seemed different. In the past, whenever they argued, it was always him who invoked the will of fire. But now, Denzo couldn't seem to stop bringing it up. He stared at Denzo for several seconds before cutting straight to the chase. The village needs root. Name your conditions. I can restore root's funding and even grant you a request. So long as it doesn't violate the will of fire. Hearing this, Shizue looked up again, a faint smirk forming on his lips. Hiruzen, I do have one condition. Since Root is an organization under the Hokage's authority, then any and all of Root's actions, including covert operations behind enemy lines, must have official authorization. Every mission order must be personally signed and issued by you from now on. Chapter 326, a mission concerning Hidden Leaf Village's future. After returning to the Hokage's office, the third Hokage angrily swept everything off his desk. Staring at the now empty surface, he took a deep breath to calm himself and began recalling his conversation with Denzo from half an hour ago. In order to minimize casualties on the front lines, he had agreed to all of Denzo's conditions in exchange for his commitment to head to the battlefield. To be honest, Denzo's conditions weren't particularly excessive. As the Hokage, he should be aware of and approve all of Root's actions before they were executed. However, this also meant he would be held accountable for Denzo's actions. Many of the things Denzo did in the shadows could never be exposed to the public. If he were to officially acknowledge and approve them, his carefully cultivated reputation would crumble in no time. But at this point, he had no other choice. If things continued as they were, his faction's power would dwindle significantly, and even the village's safety would be at risk. After calming himself, the Hyzerin picked up the latest intelligence reports from the battlefield. Upon seeing that Hidden Stone's village's Jinchuriki had caused hundreds of casualties among Hidden Leaf Village's forces, his facial expression was grim, and his gaze shifted toward the direction of the Ninja Academy. If Hidden Leaf Village's own Jinchuriki had been combat-ready, the front lines wouldn't be in such dire straits. Denzo had stopped provoking him face-to-face, but his words had carried a veiled threat. However, Naruto was still too young. Sending him to the battlefield now would only make him a liability. Still, even though Naruto couldn't be deployed immediately, he had already been in the Ninja Academy for 4 years. Only 2 more years remained before his graduation. It was time to start considering who should be Naruto's Jonin instructor. Finding the right mentor was crucial. At that moment, the third Hokage suddenly thought of Kakashi. Kakashi was the disciple of Minato Namikaze and the strongest among the younger generation of Jonin. Making Kakashi Naruto's mentor was the best possible choice. There was no need to wait until Naruto graduated. The training could begin now. With that decision made, the third Hokage turned to the Anbu beside him and ordered, "Summon Kakashi. I have a crucial task for him." Not long after, Kakashi appeared before the third Hokage, dressed in his Anbu uniform. Looking at the Hokage in confusion, he asked cautiously, "Lord Third, what do you need from me? Are you sending me to reinforce the front lines?" Kakashi believed the request had to be related to the war. Since leaving Denzo's route, he served directly under the third Hokage in Anbu. He had only recently returned to the village after completing a mission to track down enemy spies hidden within Hidden Leaf Village. The third Hokage shook his head and replied, "While the war is important, I have an even more critical task for you. One that concerns the village's future." Kakashi was surprised. A mission that concerns the future of Hidden Leaf Village? But high-ranking officials often exaggerated. Whether or not it was truly that important was another matter. The third Hokage could sense Kakashi's skepticism and asked, "Do you still remember Naruto Uzumaki?" Kakashi's expression shifted, and he quickly responded, "Naruto? He's the son of Lord Fourth and the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, right? Is someone like a villager or a ninja targeting him?" "No, he's not under threat. His reputation in the village is actually quite good.